Right, welcome everybody to this afternoon's strategic planning meeting. If you could put phones on silent or vibrate, switch them off, whatever. Right, membership of today's committee. Everybody looks to be here, apart from Councillor Thompson, who I think might be late. Item 2 minutes of the previous meeting, can we pass those as a true record? Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest in lobbying. I'll start with Councillor Davis.
Yeah, I've had an email regarding the Slow Farm solar farm. So I've not just noted it and not given any advice whatsoever.
Councillor Sokol.
None, Chair.
Councillor Patterson.
None, Chair.
Councillor Harmer.
Yes, Chair, I've received an email about Brockhole Villa Farm and also a separate email about Voltaic Farm, neither of which I've taken any action on.
Councillor Pinnock.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, like Councillor Davis and Councillor Armour, I've had an email about the photovoltaic farm.
Yeah.
I have also been lobbied on numerous occasions by residents of Oakenshaw about the item, sorry, it's 15. I have not, I've said that I can't express an opinion, but I've noted their comments, and that's it. Yeah, thank you.
And I've received the same email with regards to 2021-93644. No action or advice taken. That's all I've had. Item 4, admission of public. This is live meeting done on YouTube, so no shouting and swearing and whistling, etc. Item 5, public questions. Any questions? No. Deputations, petitions? No. No. Right, we did site visits this morning. We went to Bradley Villa Farm, then Low Farm up Wakefield Road at Flockton, then Brockhole's at Holmfirth, then wound us way back to Huddersfield into this lovely cool town hall where we're going to start doing applications now. So it's item 11, page 11, and this is land at Bradley Villa Farm. Victor.
Thank you, Chair. Victor Grayson, Development Management Master Planner in the Majors and Minerals team. This application, item 11, is an application for a residential development of 277 dwellings at the Bradley Villa Farm part of the HS11 site, which is allocated for residential development in the local plan. Members, this application was recommended for approval, but in light of exchanges with the applicant this week regarding Section 106 obligations, the recommendation is now for a deferral, although it's still recommended that relevant planning issues should still be considered today. I will explain that point shortly. Members will be aware that the majority of the allocated site, including the existing golf course at Bradley Park, is council owned. Members will also recall that a position statement relating to this application was considered by this committee in July last year. The application relates to approximately a fifth of the allocated site, namely the part at the west end of HS11 that is in private ownership. It also includes land to the north, outside the allocated site and within the greenbelt that slopes downhill towards the M62. Shepherdstown Lane forms the application site's eastern boundary. The application site is currently in agricultural use and is subject to constraints, including in relation to highways, the adjacent residential and agricultural uses, the site's visibility in the wider landscape, and the setting of a nearby listed building. These are views of the site from the west, from Shepherdstown Lane looking southeast into the site, and of Shepherdstown Lane close to its junction with Bradley Road. This is a view of the site from Bradford Road, where a vehicular access already exists. Of relevance to major development in Bradley, members will be aware that the Council put its preferred option for the Cooper Bridge Highway Improvement Scheme to public consultation last summer. That preferred option is illustrated here. Site allocation, HS11 and local plan policies require, among other things, a master plan to inform any development proposal at this site, as well as supporting infrastructure and facilities, including a two-form entry primary school and highway improvement works. Members will recall that a master plan was prepared in 2017 by the Council in support of the proposed site allocation as part of the local plan preparation process. This is shown here in the top left of this slide. The master plan included an east-west spine road running through the site and re-provision of golfing facilities. That master plan was approved by Cabinet and had merit. However, over 5 years on, it is appropriate to review and update the master plan in light of current planning policy and other considerations. As required by the site allocation, the applicant has carried out master planning work for the entire HS11 allocated site. Of note, for the council-owned part of HS11, this work is indicative and would not fix a specific layout. The main purpose of this master planning exercise here is to demonstrate how the proposed development at Bradley Villa Farm could integrate with, complement, and not compromise or prejudice future development to the east. So, as far as this current plan application is concerned, shown here is the layout that was proposed when the application was submitted last year, when 270 units were proposed. This layout was considered by members last July, as were the elevations shown on the right. Officers and members had significant concerns regarding this layout and other aspects of the proposed development, but that layout's been superseded. So what's now proposed is a 277 unit development with a different layout, shown here. The applicant still proposes a single vehicular access from Bradford Road to the west, and members can see here the proposed east-west spine road that would run through the site. The key changes to the proposals made since July last year are listed at paragraph 5.5 of the committee report and include an increase in the number of units from 270 to 277, internal layout changes including a reduction in the number of cul-de-sacs, revised house types, the introduction of 2 3-storey apartment blocks at the east end of the site, a redesign of the spine road to include shared cycle and footways along its entire length on both sides of the carriageway and an amendment to its alignment. Planted buffers have been added to Shepherdstown Lane and the north edge of the site. There's been a redesign of the proposed open space, and there's been the addition of east-west routes across Shepherdstown Lane for pedestrians and cyclists. To the right of the slide are a selection of some of the 17 house types proposed by the applicant. Drainage infrastructure is still proposed in the part of the application site that is within the green belt, and that's obviously the arm that extends northwards down towards the M62. Given that development of the entire HS11 site would be environmental impact assessment development, in support of the application, the applicant submitted an environmental statement, as well as supporting documents including a detailed design and access statement, which has provided more explanation of the proposed design approach. Given the site allocation, residential development at this site is considered acceptable in principle. Furthermore, 277 homes would make a significant contribution towards the Council's local plan housing targets, which carries significant weight in the balance of planning considerations and which is welcomed. Subject to conditions, there are no significant obstacles to residential development here in terms of site stability, minerals, contaminated land or archaeology, and it's recommended that an odour constraint be addressed via a Section 106 obligation regarding the cessation of egg production at the adjacent farm. The site is considered to be a sustainable location for residential development, given its proximity to existing facilities and infrastructure and its location on the edge of an existing settlement. Staying on the subject of sustainability, sustainable transport measures have been proposed and or would be secured via recommended conditions in a Section 106 agreement. And members will also note the information included in yesterday's committee update regarding the provision of air source heat pumps instead of gas boilers for the majority of the dwellings. The amended proposed layout is now considered acceptable. The proposed spine road follows an east-west alignment that would enable connection to future development to the east, and an acceptable hierarchy of streets is proposed. As per officer advice, no vehicular access other than for emergency access is proposed from Shepherdstown Lane. With the additional planting and the moving of development away from the site boundaries to the north and northeast, landscape impacts would now be acceptable. The additional planting would also help maintain the rural approach to and the setting of the nearby listed building. A biodiversity metric calculation has been submitted. As expected, the development would result in a biodiversity net loss, and therefore to achieve the policy required net gain, it is recommended that a financial contribution be secured. Appropriate house types, building heights and materials are proposed. This annotated plan highlights some of the previously mentioned aspects of the proposed development, including the drainage infrastructure proposed within the Greenbelt. The applicant has provided further information regarding those works, and as set out in the committee report, due to their scale and nature, it is considered that they would preserve the openness of the Greenbelt and would not conflict with the purposes of including land within it. The 4 connections with Shepherdstown Lane are also highlighted in this slide. These are proposed in appropriate locations and would help achieve good neighbourhood permeability and connectivity as and when the larger part of the HS11 site is brought forward for development. A pond to the east within the golf course is shown here, and the spine road alignment has been amended so its future eastwards trajectory would not result in the loss of this pond, which has been home to white-clawed crayfish. The location of the proposed new junction on Bradford Road is also shown. And here are more detailed drawings of the site entrances and highway works. The proposed Bradford Road entrance would allow traffic approaching from the north and south to enter the site. However, traffic leaving the site would only be able to turn left. Drivers wanting to leave the site and wanting to head north would need to turn left and then go around the Bradley Bar roundabout before heading back up Bradford Road. A Toucan Crossing is proposed at this new junction, although since this slide was compiled, the applicant has agreed to locate this crossing slightly further south along Bradford Road for visibility and safety reasons. Also shown here is an indicative improvement scheme for the Bradley Bar roundabout. This would not be required to mitigate the impacts of the 277 proposed units. However, it, or a scheme like it, would be required as and when the wider HS11 site is brought forward for development. As set out in yesterday's committee update, the current applicant would be expected to contribute £287,950 towards this scheme. On the right is a detailed plan of the proposed site entrance for pedestrians and cyclists off Shepherdstown Lane, close to Bradley Road. This has been subject to safety assessment. No vehicular access is proposed here. Staying on highways matters, following the applicant's submission of an assessment of impacts upon junctions 24 and 25 of the M62, National Highways have withdrawn their earlier objection to the application. And then regarding the Cooper Bridge Highway Improvement Scheme, the current applicant will be expected to contribute £820,474 towards that scheme. Regarding affordable housing and housing generally, 55 affordable housing units representing a policy compliant 20% provision are proposed. These will be provided as 30 affordable or social rented units, 14 thirst homes and 11 other intermediate units, which is an appropriate 10-year split. The affordable units would not be distinguishable from the private units, and their locations are considered acceptable. As confirmed in yesterday's committee update, all units would now comply with the minimum floor space figures of the nationally described space standards. All of the proposed dwellings would be provided with a good level of amenity, and impacts on existing adjacent dwellings would be limited and acceptable. Regarding drainage concerns have been adequately addressed. Regarding blockage flows at the part of the site around units 142 to 146, the applicant has confirmed that units can be moved eastwards to enable the creation of adequate space for water to pass in a blockage scenario. Regarding the suspected culverted water course at the northernmost part of the site, which is, if members can see, a green shaded area running roughly southwest to northeast towards the top of this slide. That's where a suspected water course, a water course was suspected to have existed entering the site at that north corner of the developable area. Following supervised site investigation carried out yesterday, it's been established that this water course does not in fact enter the site, which has allayed some of the concerns of the lead local flood authority. Regarding existing waterlogging in the southeast corner of the site, the LLFA have advised that the proposed development would not make matters worse, and water would in fact be intercepted and directed away from this area. Subject to conditional details, acceptable materials, which are shown here in this materials plan, are proposed, as is an acceptable distribution of materials, although as noted at paragraph 10.91 of the committee report, in response to concerns raised by ward members, the applicant has confirmed that more extensive use of brown brick could be possible. In summary, and to conclude, subject to conditions in the Section 106 agreement, the proposed development is considered acceptable. Significant amendments have been made during the life of the application, and certainly since July last year when members last saw this scheme, to ensure relevant planning concerns have been addressed. The proposed development would make a significant contribution to housing delivery in the borough, and approval of full planning permission was recommended. Notwithstanding the acceptability of the proposals and the recommendations set out in the committee report, deferral of the committee's decision is now recommended. This is because the applicant this week has requested a review of some of the contributions set out in the draft 106 heads of terms, and has requested sight of evidence that informed the relevant calculations. So that officers can bring this application back to committee with more certainty regarding the applicant's position on Section 106 matters, it is recommended that the committee's decision be deferred today, specifically for this reason. However, it is also requested that all of the relevant planning matters be considered today, if Chair and members agree. Thank you, Chair.
Right, we've got two speakers. First one is Councillor Homewood.
Hi, Chair.
Hi, James. Right, you've 5 minutes starting from now.
Great, thank you. So yeah, thank you for letting me speak. I'll just cover a couple of the issues that I can see here. So firstly, I just wanted to touch on the master planning element of it. So I know that we just ran through the master plan. So from my perspective, I think the master plan that we've got now doesn't tell us much more than what we already had back in 2017. And I know the council hasn't really been involved as landowner in that master planning, which is a little bit concerning. And I'm not quite sure where we've come and how far forward we've come on that master plan. I know it was mentioned that the master plan as was signed off in 2017. As we've heard, there's been some changes since then, particularly in the Cooper Bridge scheme. And also, even at the time, I think Cabinet recognised that there was quite a lot of work that needed to be done on that master plan. And when you look at it, I'm not kind of sure what that new master plan is really telling us, other than the access points to the site, which I think were already there on the earlier plan. So I have some concerns there, and I think that's leading me into a couple of concerns around the wider concerns on the plan. So the first one would be just in terms of the off-site contributions for biodiversity and open space. Residents have raised that as a concern with me, saying, why is that not being delivered on site? Now, when I read the report, it intimates to me that, well, maybe that contribution will be used on the wider HS11 site, but I don't know if that's confirmed or conditioned, or whether it can be, because surely as a site of that size, we need to have the contributions being met on that site, and I don't know whether that's certain to happen or not. So I don't know whether that's anything that we can clarify. It does refer in the report quite a few times to the council being an adjacent landowner who would probably have to provide that provision anyway. So it would be helpful to understand if that's what's happening. My second concern, which is also in the report, is just around the Shepherdstown Lane and the access point there. So as I say, if the master plan is looking at the access across the site and the link roads, Spine Road, and whether it actually can genuinely be linked across, and the impact it has on Shepherdstown Lane because of the vehicular access that's needed along Shepherdstown Lane to access the farm that will be at the other side of the Spine Road. And I'm not clear how that access can be maintained through traffic without it potentially in a future development leading to a wider vehicular access to Shepherdstown Lane. And I think what I've been told to this point is that that'll be dealt with at the point that the next part of the land comes forward. But it seems to me that should be part of the master planning, and I think particularly when there is a kind of foot and cycle access point off Shepherdstown Lane to the site, we don't want that to become a vehicular access, because that's going to be critical to that working. So I do have real concerns about that, and I'm really unsure as to whether that kind of access across can be managed. I don't see how it can be protected through like a traffic regulation order, because I just don't understand how that's going to be monitored and enforced. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention was just about the traffic implications on the Bradley Bar element. So my understanding has always been that because of the fact that that roundabout's already at capacity, that there would need to be improvements to improve capacity before any houses could be built, or at least as many as 277 could be built. And I think what we're saying now is that no, they can be built, and we'll just accept that there's an impact on that capacity, and that we will get more traffic going on there. And I think it concerns me particularly because of the access to the site. It's not just adding volume of traffic, but I'm querying how, when we get traffic queuing back from Bradley Bar roundabout towards Brighouse, how vehicles are actually going to be able to access in and out of the site at peak times, coming across the traffic, particularly when it's 2 lanes. And as we've mentioned, traffic can't turn right out of the development, so they're going to have to come across the lanes of traffic to get into the kind of right-hand lane to turn around the roundabout in order to get down Bradford Road towards Brighouse. So I'm a bit concerned that we're going to have a situation where we're going to have increases in impact on the capacity of that junction, and nothing's going to be delivered pre the houses being built. I think it would just be worth the committee considering that. I do welcome some of the improvements that will hopefully help from a safety perspective, because I think at the moment there has been quite a few accidents on that roundabout, so that's a positive thing. But I think in terms of capacity, that hasn't been resolved yet. So I'd just be asking that question really around, is it really viable to not increase the capacity when you're putting those 277 houses there up front? Thanks, Chair. I think that's everything I had to say.
Right, thanks James for that, just on 5 minutes. Next speaker is Jonathan Dunbavin, joining via team.
Hi Chair, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Good, thank you, Chair. Chair and members, good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. Since the pre-application report and subsequent position statement, the scheme has changed significantly, and there is much to commend it. In the intervening months, we have worked intensively with your officers, and the scheme is now supported by them. The proposals are based on a master plan and allocation-wide assessment that reflects the Council's aspirations for this site. It now delivers a layout that has gateway entrances and a real sense of place, or works seamlessly with the balance of the allocation when it's brought forward. The house designs and the palette of materials are complementary to the surrounding properties, and the houses are 100% space standards compliant. The proposals will create a high-quality living environment for existing proposed occupiers with central open space and high levels of connectivity. The housing mix for both open market and affordable includes 1 to 4 bedroom units, with a number of social landlords, including Yorkshire Housing, eager to deliver the affordable units. The mix and density proposed is supported by officers and is reflective of several schemes recently approved by members. Redrow are committed to a full policy compliance Section 106 package. We just need to see some of the evidence base behind some of the costings which we have asked for but not yet received. Given the positive benefits of the scheme, Chair, I would ask members to support the officer recommendation, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to address those. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right. That's all the speakers. Members, it's over to you. Carol.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, my main concern actually is Bradley Bar roundabout. Not so much necessarily the capacity. It possibly, to me, just from my own personal experience and nothing technical, feels under capacity, because my concern is the speed of traffic going around that roundabout without any direction. I mean, it comes onto that roundabout very fast, and then because it's actually quite wide, the carriageway there, then there's no lane discipline, or there's a lack of lane discipline, which makes it quite a dangerous roundabout as far as I'm concerned. And I do, or certainly in the recent past, have been up there quite frequently. So I'm really, that's not a question so much as I'm pleased to see that, well, part of the section 106 would be directed to work on that roundabout, though I do recognise that it's part of the wider scheme, not necessarily this particular part of it. So yeah, that's my main concern. I'm happy with the amendments that have been made that we've seen to previous pre-application, etc. So yes, thank you.
Councillor Pinnock.
Thank you, Chair. My main concerns about this relate to highways, and I do know this junction, the Bradley Bar junction, quite well, because every time I come into Huddersfield, I go past it, and I agree with Councillor Patterson. The speed of traffic round that roundabout sometimes is actually quite alarming, and particularly if people don't indicate correctly, you can't tell where they're actually going to go, and then this is combined with something that seems a bit unclear to me about access and egress from the one site entrance onto this site. Now, I understand that you coming out of the site, you will not be able to turn right. This therefore puts more traffic onto the Bradley Bar roundabout, because you then have to go all the way around it to then proceed towards Brickhouse. What is also not clear is what do people do coming up from Huddersfield who want to get into the site? It's not clear to me at all how you do that. Do you go a bit further up and then do a semi-U-turn and into the site? So that's not clear particularly. Then, of course, I have an issue about the Spine Road because not only will this access be for this application, but once the master plan is applied to the rest of the site, there will be a lot more traffic coming from further down. I'd also like to explore the status of Shepherdstown Lane, because when we had the previous meeting, I did my own site visit. It was before we had shepherded site visits, if I put it like that. And I drove down there. Maybe I shouldn't have done, but clearly it is an access to the farm at the bottom, and one or two other things as well, which are not clear to me. So there would be people who have a legitimate right to drive down there. So can you actually block off the entrance to motor vehicles? Possibly not, unless somebody's got a key. So I'm not quite clear how that's going to work. I mean, I can probably see the reason why you wouldn't want to use that as an access for motor vehicles, because about its only use in relation to Bradley Road would be if somebody wants to come out and then turn left, or go in from Bradley Road, turn left. It wouldn't be quite difficult to turn across the carriageway. So I'm not suggesting that it be turned into a proper access, but these are all loose ends, which to me don't seem to be being addressed, at least not to my satisfaction. And to cap all of this, I don't know how real this is, but there has long been talk, I know Councillor McBride used to talk about it, of a new motorway junction. So has the impact of having a motorway junction there been modelled in relation both to this site and to the larger site allocation? Because there will be implications for people who want to go from this site, get onto the motorway, which you can only do by going round Bradley Bar roundabout. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. There's enough to be thinking about there, I think.
Right, I'll bring Moan in, and then after that, I think it might be worthwhile getting Chris from Highways to do an update. So, Moan.
Yeah, Chair, I think I got concerns same like Councillor Pinnick with regard to single access on Bradford Road for 277 houses. I don't think it's right. I don't think the single access will cope so many property on the one way. Single 270, so two car each house is about 600 cars every day they're passing through. I don't think it's right, but I know there might be some future plan. We have granted some planning permission, 105 house further down there. I don't know when they will come into force. Yeah, so can we look into the put so many condition and future plan further down there? There would be another access to these 277 houses from other side somewhere, either on 10th Lane or what they call something like that. But again, 270 single access will put a lot of pressure on the Bradley roundabout, which is already so busy. Yes, officer says there will be a improvement to this Bradley roundabout, but I don't know what plan there, how we going to improve this Bradley roundabout, which is already nobody knows who going first into there, so people are taking chance to into the roundabout. So we need some proper plan on the Bradley roundabout, what the improvement will be. Again, on those those Shepherdstown Lane and Spine Road, which is at the moment is not unmade those roads. Yeah, we need some to upgrade of this road for pedestrian or cyclists as well. So I think officers are saying they're asking to change, to defer it for further negotiation with the developer. I think that they will see some improvement. Come back next meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Chris, do you want to bring members up to speed with the roundabouts?
Yeah, I can do. I'll try to go through the. Thank you, Chair. I'll try to go through the points as they were raised. Bradley Bar roundabout. It's operating close to capacity as it stands. Obviously, this development will have an impact on it, but it's obviously been assessed. And it's been said it won't be a severe impact. Now, when the larger site's developed, there will ultimately be a severe impact to that junction. And what we've asked this developer to do is just draw up a scheme, which is the one that's been shown, an indicative scheme which has been costed, so that they can contribute their percentage towards the larger scheme. At the moment, that scheme is not justified because they don't create a severe impact at it. They will have a cumulative impact, but it's not considered to be a severe. But we do want to capture a contribution from them to a larger scheme, which will have to be delivered at some time in the future. When the larger site starts to come through, the actual trigger point hasn't been determined at this point, but it will need to be delivered at some point. There are some, Councillor Patterson mentioned about the safety of that roundabout, and yes, there has been a few accidents involving more vulnerable road users like pedestrians and cyclists, to be fair. And this scheme does focus on improving conditions for pedestrians and cyclists rather than purely adding capacity to junctions, which is something that we don't tend to want to do these days, because the impetus is on providing improvements for active travel. Rather than asking the developers to do spend some money doing some minor improvements there, which wouldn't really do much, we felt it was money better spent for them to contribute towards the wider scheme, which will actually have some benefit. The council's own, this roundabout is flagged upon the council's radar, and the highway safety team are looking at doing some interim measures there, which will be implemented probably within the next 12, 18 months. But this developer will be contributing towards the larger scheme, which will be along the lines of the scheme that's been shown. So that's Bradley Bar. I mean, the scheme we're looking at will involve signalling, which should help reduce the speed, these circulating speeds of people approaching the roundabout fast and circulating the roundabout fast, which I think is some of the issues. Obviously, if it's signalised, that will reduce speeds, because there were times when they're stopping and starting, and so it'll regulate the flows on the roundabout and also reduce the speeds on the roundabout. Shepherdstown Lane, that obviously it forms the eastern boundary of the current site. The Spine Road goes up and terminates at that point. In the wider development of the site, the Spine Road will cross Shepherdstown Lane. I would imagine the way it will be designed is that the Spine Road will be the priority, Shepherdstown Lane will be the give way to that. The exact control measures will be designed at that point, but I would imagine it will be something. I mean, Shepherdstown Lane is very lightly used as far as traffic goes, and we looked at it this morning. You can see why. It's effectively a single track, sort of car track type of thing, which serves a few farm buildings. It's probably more used by walkers and the like. So I would imagine that the access control measures will be something along the lines of collapsible bollards for people who have a need to access it, with the priority being to the Spine Road. I mean, the detail of that interaction and that junction between the two would come out when they need to cross that Shepherdstown Lane. At the moment, it terminates at that point with a temporary turning head. The only traffic from this development that would only be used as emergency access in an emergency if the main access off of Bradford Road was out of action for any reason. Motorway junction on M62, 24A, whatever they were going to call it. I believe that proposal has now been dropped by National Highways. They've obviously been consulted on this application, and after an initial holding objection, have now removed their objection to it. And my understanding is that additional junction is no longer in their forward planning, certainly not in the next 5 to 10 year forward planning anyway. So that hasn't been, we haven't considered it as part of this scheme, and they've obviously had a look at it. And regarding the single access of 277 houses for a single point of access, that is within the limit that is permitted off of a single point of access. I mean, this is a 6.75 metre carriageway, this Spine Road. It's compliant in terms of design standards, and it's suitable to serve development of that quantity. Obviously, in the larger scheme, it will continue through the Spire Road, and there will be 2 or possibly 3 points of access when the larger site's built out. So the whole development traffic will be split over 2/3 access points, which won't include Shepherdstown Lane, which will just remain as it is now, effectively. I mean, there are some improvements proposed as part of this scheme which improve pedestrian and cycle linkage from Bradley Road to the site, which is seen as a positive thing. That will link to the wider cycle network and enable pedestrians to get to Bradley Road. What were the points, were they? I think that was all the points that were raised by councillors, unless I've missed anything.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry, turning right. Yeah, the junction proposed is left in, left out, but it is right in. So if you're going northbound towards the site out of Huddersfield, there is a right turn lane provided to turn right. But the only movement that isn't catered for in this junction is right out. Now that assessment shows that actually the number of vehicles wanting to do that is only about 7% of the traffic exiting the site. And I think at the moment that's something like 11 vehicles in the peak hour. So it's a small number of vehicles that would want to do that movement, based on what we're looking at here. Because there's and it would be difficult to do an all movement junction at this point, because they've got private drives opposite it, which would find themselves in the middle of a junction, which would potentially conflict with other movements. So the solution we've got at the moment is seen as the most appropriate solution for the number of right turners that we've got. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Councillor Davis.
Thanks, Chair. A number of the points I was going to raise have just been covered, so that's fine on the highway side. A couple of other points. First, a comment. I think great to see the planning team working so closely with the developer and the constructive way being able to achieve changes. In particular, particularly impressed about the air source heat pumps. I think that's a great achievement. And it just reminds me that I'm certainly going to be raising it in every other development going forward. So just as a pre-warning for the planning as well. But I think this is a great precedent for us, really, as an authority, to really lay down a marker now to developers going forward. That, as far as I'm concerned, this really should be a very minimum that we're seeking to achieve in terms of air quality and obviously environmental change, etc. The other issue, which Councillor Homewood raised about biodiversity, I'd like to hear a little bit more about that, because understandably a site this size is going to be negative. There's no question about that. I can understand that the deficit can't be made up actually on that site. But what I'd like to hear is whether we can achieve that in the near to this site and in this neighbourhood. I think it's fine to have sections 106 and the monies, but if that dissipates elsewhere, understandably people in this area are going to be very concerned. So I'd just like to have some more understanding about that aspect as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. Victor.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, just on the biodiversity net gain point, yes, we have looked into that. There is a lot of council-owned land, obviously, to the east of the Bradley Villa farm site, where there will be ample opportunities for habitat creation and enhancement. Officers will work with the applicant to facilitate that. So that is literally next door to this application site. There are also, in the wider area, the wider neighbourhood, there are areas of ancient woodland that would benefit from enhancement as well. So if ward members and officers and local residents feel it's more appropriate to spend the money on those existing habitats and green infrastructure, it could be spent there as well. But yes, short answer is yes, there's ample opportunity locally.
So Victor, do you want to run through reasons for a deferment, as you mentioned on the site visit this morning and beginning of your presentation?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's a fairly brief and simple reason for deferment. As I mentioned earlier on, the applicant this week has asked for some of the contributions set out on the first page of the committee report to be reviewed. They'd like to see evidence that informed the calculations that resulted in those contributions, for example, to do with the primary school, the cost of providing a primary school, the cost of sports facility relocation as part of the wider HS11 development. We have that information. We can share it with the applicant, or certainly headline high-level information with the applicants for them to review. And allowing for that discussion to take place, as I said earlier, will enable us officers to come back to committee and say to members, this is the position agreed with the applicant, this is what the applicant will agree to be included in the Section 106 agreement. We can use that as a solid basis for drawing up the Section 106 agreement and then issuing the planning permission. So the recommendation now is just to defer on that reason, if members agree. Thank you, Chair.
So I'm prepared to accept what Victor said for a deferment until we get these 106s worked out. Any members, Andrew?
I was going to move the acceptance of that proposal, Chair.
Right. Carol?
Sorry, can I just ask a question about the education contribution? Because in the report at 811 it talks about 655,000, and then in the 106 agreement it talks about 1,400,000. So I'm not quite sure which is the figure we should be looking at.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, so there's three elements to the education and childcare contributions. There'd be a 91,956 contribution towards early years and childcare provision, £1,414,708 towards a new two-form entry primary school, and that's calculated based on a 14% share of a £10 million cost for delivering a new primary school on the council-owned part of the HS11 site. And then finally, there's a £5,319 contribution recommended towards secondary provision. Sorry, Councillor, what was the other figure that you read out? Sorry.
It was 811 on page 25, 655,000 total.
Oh, beg your pardon. Sorry, through you, Chair. That was a comment made by education colleagues before the application was amended. The number of units was increased to 277, and before we had conversations about the breakdown of those contributions. So apologies, but that figure is superseded by the figures I just read out. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Victor. So I think between us, me and Andrews moved it and seconded it for deferment. So any more members, any more comments? So do you want to move to a vote? Right, go to a vote. This is for deferment.
Councillor Davis?
For.
Councillor Thompson? Wait for your light to go. And wait for your light to go. Councillor Councillor Patterson?
Oh, 4.
Councillor Armour?
4.
Councillor Pennant?
4.
Councillor Hall?
4. That's unanimous. So that item is deferred. Next item, page 75. This was one of his site visits this morning. Memory serves me right. And it's the land off Woodhead Road at Brockholes. Right, David, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. I'm David Wordsworth, Team Leader for the Major and Minerals section of the Planning Service of the Council, and I am presenting this one on behalf of Richard Gilbert, pardon, Chair, who's on annual leave. This application is from Miller Homes on land off Woodhead Road, Brockholes, for 137 dwelling houses, and is referred to on pages 75 to 122 of the main agenda. This is an allocated housing site, HS161, in the Kirklees local plan. The first slide presents the planning application site inside of the red line boundary that extends to 9.65 hectares. The latest amendment removed a covenanted area shown within the blue line. The covenant on the land restricts development is anticipated to come forward at a later date and would be subject to a condition regarding accessibility. In respect of the geographical features of the site, Woodhead Road is positioned to the west with a level drop of 25 metres across the site that descends down to the River Home in the east, which forms a northeast boundary. To the east, the site wraps around dwellings located on Smithy Place. Further south, the curtilages of properties on Hagroyd Lane share their rear curtilages with the site's red line boundary. A small cluster of dwellings is present on the western side of the site, adjacent to the Phoenix Works industrial unit, which gives way to woodland further north. The composition of the site itself is mostly semi-improved grassland, with a central spine of trees traversing north to south and flanking Smithy Place up to where it meets Woodhead Road. The image on the left of the slide presents the level drop into the site from Woodhead Road. The principle of access from this point has been established by earlier planning permission for 59 dwellings granted 2 years ago. The access will provide a maximum gradient of 1 in 12 into the site across a small section of its length. However, this remains within 110 maximum gradient allowed for this type of road, as advised within the Highways Design Guide, SPD. The access proposed in this scheme has improved since the previous permission by the inclusion of an extended footway leading to the bus stop beside the Smithy Place access. Currently, bus users have to stand on the road or take refuge on Smithy Place to catch the bus on the Woodhead Road side of the access. The picture on the right represents one of the elements that we saw on site this morning at the site visit, and indicates the limitations of expanding Smithy Place Lane to incorporate a footway due to the presence of residential gardens, a telegraph pole and electrical transmission cables. In terms of the site layout, this slide presents the current housing layout. The site is proposed to deliver 137 dwelling houses, which is 13 units above the indicative site yield, but below the Kirklees local plan density requirement of 35 dwellings per hectare. The proposed figure of 137 is accepted and welcomed, as it would contribute significantly to the housing supply in the local area, whilst achieving a higher and more sustainable density than anticipated in the local plan site allocation policy. The development is to come forward with a full policy compliant package of planning obligations that includes 20% on-site affordable housing contribution, 546,000 made towards local schools, an off-site financial contribution of 94,288 to address shortfalls in specific open space typologies, and 471,500 towards off-site measures to achieve biodiversity net gain. There are 70,000 towards a sustainable travel fund, as well as a further 10,000 towards travel plan monitoring, as well as an off-site financial contribution of 33,000 towards bus stop upgrades on Woodhead Road, immediately adjacent to the site entrance, and signage improvements on Smithy Place Lane. Finally, a further 15,000 is provided towards signalised junction improvements in Honley to ensure that these junctions run more efficiently. The developer also proposes to provide 2 play areas, 2 laps on site. The total financial package of the 106 agreement totals £1,240,050, in addition to the commuted sums of 27 affordable houses, which makes up the 20% affordable units on site, consisting of 15 affordable rent, 5 shared ownership and 7 first homes. In respect of drainage, surface water is to drain to the River Home through an attenuation tank that meets the 30% reduction of outfall, including uplift for climate change. The tank and outfall drain can be seen at the northernmost part of the site, if you see my cursor there. Meanwhile, the foul water is to be pumped via a pump solution discharging to the existing sewer on Smithy Place Lane between plots 122 and 123 to the south. Officers have conducted a full review of separation distances across the site with existing properties and are satisfied that the amenity of existing residents will be maintained in respect of privacy, light and overbearance. I should just mention, Chair, also that there is in fact a shortfall in the properties that are NDSS compliant, that is National Design Space Standards. 7 of the units would provide less floor space than the minimum amount. It is a shortfall of approximately 3 metres in each case. That would leave 95% of the units on site complying with the NDSS standards. The next slide you can see is representing the eastern part of the site, close to the River Home. Initial comments from representatives and conservation and design colleagues highlighted the initial submission's poor design quality, particularly in respect of how it related to the River Home, which is a highly positive character feature of the landscape in this location. To present to members how far the scheme has come, The applicant has provided the above 3D render, which is a view from the site from the bank of the river. As it is evident the initial design had a poor relationship to the river home. The path was to be mown only and led to nowhere, whilst the dwellings had little interaction with the open space. Following amendments requested by officers, the applicants rearranged the layout and provided alternative house types that enabled the dwellings to present to the riverside. It is appreciated that many representatives have concerns for the welfare of pedestrians travelling along the site via Smithy Place Lane to access services within Brockholes. Officers have sought to provide the most realistic and achievable improvements to Smithy Place Lane in the form of signing and lining to highlight the safety implications in the area. The plan on the left slide sets out the scope of works to be implemented, which is mainly signage and lining. It is recognised that some individuals may not consider the measures sufficient to ensure the safety of pedestrians. However, officers need to highlight the context in which the current set of improvements will be made. Firstly, a large proportion of users travelling from or via the development to Brockholes would utilise the stairway, which is to be improved at the point where it connects to Smithy Place Lane. The distance whereby pedestrians would walk on the shared use part of the highway is 37 metres from the stairway to the nearest footway. This is considered a short distance that can be covered in a relatively short period of time. Secondly, officers do not suggest that there is no risk to pedestrians in this area, but based on a review of accident records on Smithy Place Lane, where there have been no injury-related accidents associated with pedestrians over the last 20 years, this demonstrates that any incident risk is low. Finally, Chair, to conclude, the Planning Casework Unit within the Department for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities have contacted the case officer to query whether the application falls under any of the criteria set out under the Town and Country Planning Consultation England Direction 2021. The officers confirmed that as the Environment Agency removed their holding objection on the 24th of May 2022, that the application no longer fell under any of the criteria set out within the direction, so does not require referral. Overall, the proposed development complies with the site's designation within the local plan, whilst contributing significantly to identified open market and affordable housing needs in the local area. The developer has agreed to a full spectrum of planning obligations to offset or improve local provision, and the design of the scheme is significantly improved in relation to the design relationship to the river home. Officer's recommendation is per the main agenda to delegate approval of the application and the issuing of the decision notice to the Head of Planning and Development in order to complete the conditions, including those within the report, and secure a Section 106 agreement covering the listed items. Thank you, Chair, that's all.
Thanks, David. Few speakers. First is Councillor Greaves, and you've got 5 minutes.
Thank you. This application, this site has been an issue since before I became a Kirklees councillor. Indeed, as a potential site, it's been an issue for Brockholes residents for many decades. Here we are again. Planning is a compromise. It's a trade-off between the impacts and the benefits. There's no doubt that this is a difficult site, and to be fair to the applicant, Millers have tried. They've listened, they've responded, and where they're able to, they have done things to change the proposal. I guess for me the issue remains of what they're not able to change, which to my eyes is fundamental. So I'll give you a few examples of what those are. So we've heard the issues around Smithy Place Lane, and there is an accident history for that lane. It's a difficult lane to navigate, and at peak periods it is a busy cut through. This will be the main link road from the estate into Brockholes. the village in which the estate will form a new neighbourhood. So despite considering a whole range of options, Highway Safety has said that we can't have a footpath, we can't have traffic calming, we can't have narrowing, because the road itself just won't accommodate it. It's too steep, the inclines don't work, the sight lines don't work, and there's just not enough room. Millers, to be fair, were all ears in terms of they suggested they would do what could be done. But the point is, so very little can be done. So what we've got is some paint and some signs. One of the other issues with the sign is that this is a high-value ecological site. I think that's probably best explained by saying that the biodiversity off-site payment is around about £500,000. And just have a think about how many of those you've seen so far. And at this stage, we're on no net gain. So £500,000 is there to reflect just what ecological benefit this site does deliver currently. It's not just meadowland or pasture land, it is a key nature linking site, it has protected species over and across it, and no matter how much millers try, putting a housing estate on there will alter the character of it forever. Because the access is coming out at Woodhead Road, the whole estate orientates towards Honley, where I live. I don't live in Brockholes, I live in Honley. And this new neighbourhood of Brockholes bears a stronger connection, stronger relationship to the neighbouring settlement than it does to its own. And for me, that's an issue that goes to the very fundamental aspects of what sustainable is. So the three elements of sustainability: environment, economy, and then social and cultural. So all of those village services, the school, the station, the pub, the shop, the clubs, the rec, they're all on the other side of New Mill Road. So the way from the estate is down a dark track. Millers agreed to put lighting in, but they can't even put lighting on that track. So for many evenings and many early mornings, it is just going to be a country track, which is the walking route into the nearest settlement. And that impacts then on active travel. We're going to have something like 500 people, something like 200 cars. We're going to have a classroom full of kids off of that estate, and we want them to walk to their school. And yet they're going to have to go down the dark track, and then they're going to have to go down a section of road that's at school time is very busy. And then they're going to have to navigate a narrow road with no footpath. All of that lends to make this a very car-dependent site. For me, they've tried, but they cannot overcome the issues. And for that reason, I would ask the committee to refuse the application. Thank you, and thank you for the little extra time.
Thanks, Giles. Next speaker is Lee Henton.
Thank you very much. I mean, I won't labour the point of Smithy Place any further. I think it's all been well versed, but having lived on there for 18 years and some of my residents for longer than that, to say there haven't been any accidents is true, but there's been several coming out of the top of the junction. One of the residents was actually in hospital for several months because of a car collision. So it's not just about pedestrians, it is about driver safety. And I accept that millers can't make sure everybody drives safely, but as in the previous statement, just to say that there isn't a better way and it's the only way we can do, I think is a poor outcome in all fairness. Our main objection as Hagride Lane residents really is the buffer behind our boundaries between the new fencing and our boundary line on the southern section of the site, and we would like to see that considered if there were to be a wider barrier, that would certainly be a more comfortable feeling for ourselves. I would say we're not against the development of property. We all understand that, I've got 3 kids growing up wanting to buy a house. We understand that there needs to be houses built. I just think that on this particular development, the number of houses is too much for the site that exists at the moment, which is currently just, as has been said, a very vast array of wildlife, deer, owls, badgers, etc. In terms of the other point that I'd like to make, in the sense of, having lived there as a resident, you look out over fantastic views and fields. I've walked my children up and down the lane to school and back, and some of the things that have been said already echo very much in my mind, and I'm sure my friend and neighbour here would say the same. We're just looking for a bit of common sense, I think, on all of this, in that if we're going to put money before people's life and safety, then I think it needs greater consideration than just ignoring and accepting. A smaller development would be, in my opinion, more acceptable. I think it would tick an awful lot of the boxes, whether it be biodiversity, more space, more green space, fewer dwellings, fewer properties, producing cars, fewer people, etc. I think would be certainly something to be considered. I'm not looking for it to be rejected. I just think it needs to be re-looked at and maybe deferred.
Next is Paul Butler.
Good afternoon. I'm here to speak in support of the development. The application has been with the Council for over a year, and from your review of the committee report, you'll have read that we have worked with your officers to ensure that every issue is being resolved as much as we can possibly do. Before I outline the key aspects of the development, can I please ask that you always keep in mind that half this site already has benefit of a full planning permission, which could be delivered now, and the site is obviously allocated in the local plan. Any comparison between the previous scheme and this scheme will clearly illustrate the vast improvements that have been made in respect of design, density, open space and tree protection. Importantly, the existing permission has established that residential development is acceptable, including the site access location and the junction design. Notwithstanding this position, great effort has been taken to improve the proposals and to respond to every issue raised. We've worked closely with the Environment Agency to ensure that there will be no impact on the River Home. Areas of landscaping, biodiversity, tree protection and public open space have been designed in consultation with the Council's planning, landscape, ecology and tree officers, all of which support the scheme. We've responded to comments from neighbouring residents by increasing separation distances significantly beyond normal standards. We've also placed large landscaping buffers on the site's boundaries. We've met with Council Agrees and Highways officers on site to agree the footpath and pedestrian improvements that are achievable. The improvements that are proposed are the only attainable options available. We will be paying the full education contribution, and we share the ward members' views that this money should be ring-fenced to local schools. The housing mix, type, size and tenure has been discussed in detail with housing officers, and all of their specific requirements have been met. We've also worked closely with your planning and design officers to agree materials, elevational detailing and the retention and provision of stone walling throughout the site. In fact, the only thing we've not been able to do is to deliver the requested vehicular access to New Mill Road, which is simply undeliverable on account of land ownership issues, the significant loss of woodland required, the likely objections from the Environment Agency, and as there is no requirement in the policy for the allocation in the plan. As I said right at the start, we've done everything within our power to respond to the issues raised by ward members and residents. And the result of this work is an application before you today, which is recommended for approval with no objections from technical and environmental consultees. The recommendation for approval reflects not only the efforts of the applicant, but also every one of the Council's officers who have worked on this application. We therefore hope you can support your officer's recommendation for approval today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Andrew Naylor.
Thank you. I'm Andy, the Technical Director for Miller Homes. I'm just wanting to echo what Paul's just said with regards to the sort of hard work that's gone into the application from the application team, the council's officers and the consultees to the application. We've worked together and really listened to concerns of local members and residents, and we feel we've done everything possible to ensure that the development is robust, as robust as it could be. I'd predominantly asked to speak just in case there were sort of any technical points raised. I think the points raised were probably to do with highway matters. I know there's highways in the room, so I think from my point of view, just finish by saying that we've worked tirelessly over the last year to get to this point. And whilst I acknowledge that there are parties that are still objecting to the scheme, can only ask that you acknowledge the advice and guidance which has been presented by the Council's officers and statutory consultees who are recommending this for approval. The development will deliver 20% affordable housing on site and over 1.2 million of contributions to improve local schools, local play areas and local biodiversity and improvements to the highway network and pedestrian safety. I'd therefore ask that you can support your officer's recommendation today. Thank you.
Members, it's over to you. Questions? Mawan.
Thank you, Chair. I was looking for any other councillor speak before me. Yes, Chair. I've been on the site with you this morning. Look around the Woodhead Road site. Yeah. Yeah, this site is allocated for housing in the local plan. There is no doubt. Yeah. And the access is on the Woodhead side. It will be a wider access. Yeah. I got sympathy with the resident who raised the issue of lack of connection to Brockhole via New Mill Road. Yeah, we looked that side. I think it's a bit quite high road on this side. I think we need some major improvement on that connectivity plan and make it safe for other people to walking or cycling on the side. So that's I think the major objection by the local resident, including local councillors. So if we look into how we improve it and how we improve it before any building work start on the site, that would be better, because I heard there are some school children using their site at narrow road. So on that issue, so I listen to my colleagues what they say. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I listened with great interest to what Councillor Greaves said about this. Now, he probably knows better than most of us sitting at this end of the room what it's actually like on the ground. And I regret I wasn't able to come on the site visit this morning. However, what he says about the accessibility to Brockholes is really quite disturbing, because the address of this site is Brockholes, not Honley. And all right, you probably can't make a road access into Brockholes, but at the very least, the pedestrian access from the site into Brockholes should be better. I mean, if you think about it, the pedestrian access from this site to Honley is along a main road, which is quite busy. I don't know what the speed of traffic's like along there, but it's a straight road, so one could guess. And to not have an adequately signed, lighted and improved pedestrian access into Brockholes, I think is a fatal error for this site. Just because it's an allocated site doesn't mean to say that every time we get an application we then say, oh, that's all right, it's on an allocated site, so it'll be all right, no, rubber stamp. No, a lot of the arguments that Councillor Greaves has put to us are extremely relevant, and if it really is the case that the only reason they're not being implemented is is to do with the cost, then I think we need to know what the impact of that cost is on the viability of the site. I would therefore actually ask this be deferred so that we can get that information, so that we can make an assessment, because I think it's all very well having a site like this which has got an access onto Woodhead Road and therefore to directly into Onley, but it needs a decent access into Brockholes, and I don't think we've got that. At least not one that, as Councillor Greaves has pointed out, that will fit with the council's active travel agenda. It doesn't fit with us at all. So I would like to move we defer it for the reasons that I've mentioned.
Yeah, really concur with Councillor Pinnock on the issue of the connection with Brockholes. It was pretty much the point I was going to raise. I'd really like to understand, and whether that can be done today or whether it needs a deferment, I'm not sure, but really like to understand why that can't be done, how that can be done, and as Councillor Pinnock said, is it just a cost? Is there other issues? That's not clear to me, but I certainly agree that that's an essential with regards to this. Certainly for active travel, the connection into Brockholes, and it fits, as we said, with the council strategy. Also, as I said, the previous application, and I said there was a precedent set previously, I'd also like to put forward that air source pumps should be looked at now in terms of being installed as well. You know, we know the situation we're in terms of climate change. We know the situation we're in terms of energy sources, etc. And I think now is the time to act, not to retrofit properties in X years' time. So I'd like to hear from planning, you know, how that can be done. Has that been discussed? What we need to do? I think for me that's a key issue as well. And the same previously in the biodiversity. Also like to see plans where that money is being spent on the biodiversity as close as possible to this site and within this community. And then we lose it. We lose the impact. We don't lose the impact, but we lose the impact for the community if we take that money elsewhere. So those would be my three things. But certainly, I think the connection to Brockholes is essential.
Paul, one thing I'll mention, and it's something that I do whenever I find out that some units aren't up to the national minimum space standards. There's 7 on this development, and when you consider it's 2022, I look at everything about fairness and equality, and to have 7 houses that don't come up to that standard spec, I think in this day and age is a bit laughable. So I'd like that to be looked at as well in the items that members have brought up about connectivity and travel. I don't know if anybody else has got anything else to add to it, because it's being moved and seconded for deferral, but I'll ask Matthias or Deborah to come in.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify what the reasons were proposed for deferral, but Matthias is going to try and give some answers before we get to that point, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Thank you, speakers as well. All incredibly relevant points. I think we need to hear from your highways officer about the active travel and the audit that we've been through. And then also, I think we need to speak to our biodiversity officer so you can understand the audit of thought that's arrived at this scheme, because everything that's been raised is relevant, and they have been matters that we've been looking at in some detail to arrive at this position. So is that all right, Chair, if we go through the technical officers? Perhaps first.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair. I mean, I think the focus of members' concerns are certainly the pedestrian or active travel measures between the site and Brockholes, and obviously it focused on Smithy Place and Smithy Place Lane. And it's something that, as officers, we focused on fairly significantly, and got hard surface improvements to Smithy Place. We did request lighting actually, but that was actually not by the applicant on a cost thing. It was actually a council policy that they didn't want to light public rights of way. That's something that we're actually taking up with them in a separate meeting, because we certainly wanted it and the applicant were prepared to give it as well. So it wasn't knocked back on a cost thing with the applicant, or that we didn't think it was appropriate. I think it is, if you're going to make it 365 days a year usable. Regarding Smithy Place Lane, the bottom section of that, which we looked at this morning on the site visit, we did meet on site with members, with the applicant and with the road safety team, and we walked the site and we saw what was possible. But the view coming out from road safety was that there wasn't the width to provide a dedicated footway. There isn't a record of pedestrian accidents on that, or accidents full stop on that section of road. And in fact, when we looked at it, they had to go back, I think, 20 years before they found a recorded accident on that particular stretch of Smithy Place Lane. So it might seem fairly trivial what's been proposed, which is basically an upgrade of the existing signalling and line markings and that. But that was physically what could be achieved at that location. And I know members are wanting to defer it on that point, but I'm not sure what they want us to do that we can't already do. And that would be the thing I'd ask for, maybe a bit of a steer, because it has been looked at, and what you've got is what we've come up with. And that's it really.
Chair. Thank you, Chair, and Chris. Yeah, if I could just add a little bit onto that, because I know that the case officers in discussions with the applicant team and with ward members have looked at various connection points across the river home, and to see whether it was possible and feasible. And the only possible connection point was via an existing garage site, which I'll probably not be able to launch it now, but it does. Yeah, we'll launch the plan, and just so I can just take you through that, Chair. If members can see where my cursor is, there is this site that joins onto New Mill Road, and it's an existing garage site, but I know that officers, through discussions, did consider whether that could be used as a connection point, but that site is in multiple ownership, which causes problems in terms of trying to achieve and get a bridge over the river. So, as Chris has outlined and gone through the strategy, things have been looked at, options have been looked at, and what we're left with is improvements to the existing infrastructure. So, yes, we're aware that there's not a footpath that extends all the way, and there is only a small stretch that is 30 metres, 37 metres that people would have to cross. But as we've explained, we think that we're achieving the most we can with the connection issues. I mean, with it being an allocated site, the issues of sustainability will have been gone through at local plan stage, and the potential connections have obviously not produced anything other than the existing infrastructure to be able to get to the train station on the other side of the road or the school. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, could I come please? Thank you, Chair. So we've got to start at the basis of what a decision here is about. is it in accordance with the development plan, and are there other material planning considerations? And what members are alluding to is that secondary element. So it strikes me that whilst we probably can't do something fundamental to Smithy Place Lane, you have got a scheme in front of you that would meet a road safety audit assessment. It would be accepted by the council's highways engineers, and it is an improvement above what's there. But I accept people would want it to go further. I think the reality is we can only condition and control what's within the gift of delivery. And if that's not in the gift of delivery, then we are limited in that sense. I do think on the point around the lighting, which if members think that that is an important component and the applicant was prepared to do it, our engineers think it's possible, then that wouldn't be unreasonable for members to add that as a planning condition, and we can take that back up with the rights of way team, and there are other processes to secure that. Then in terms of the biodiversity, it's in the conditions, councillor. It's certainly something we're going to control and cover. It will be local and it'll be specified, so we can rest assured on that. Chair, I hear what you're saying about that shortfall of those 7 units, and I think if the applicant's in an agreement, there is a reasonable discussion with the applicant to look at those 7 units to get that extra 3 square metres, and if there isn't, then we'd have to bring that back to you. But I'd probably stand it in front of you now saying this is as far as we can probably revise the plans. If you defer it, I'm not sure that we'll be able to secure anything above and beyond, but it is entirely up to you, members. Thank you. Hope that's helpful.
Yep, thanks for that, and thanks for the explanation. Air source heat pumps?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the limitations of our planning system say that houses have to meet the building regs. We can't compel them through planning policy at this time, and I use that word at this time, to go above and beyond that. We do ask them to provide sustainability statements. Building regs are moving on all the time, so there will be an onus that whatever the current building regulations is when they launch, that they'll have to achieve that. I hear what you're saying about future sites and asking for that as a starting point, and that's something certainly we can pick up with developers. I think the Redrow example you get before you is a really solid start, and then it's about taking that forward. This one, the applicant could come in with that, but we wouldn't be in a place where we could enforce a planning condition. It wouldn't meet the tests at this time. So it was a unilateral undertaking by Redrow. Millers may consider it in future. So it's the best we can do at this time.
Yeah, I absolutely understand that, and I understand we can't compel, but I think the discussion should take place again with the developers on that specific issue. I think that, as you said, there's a very solid precedent. We've already seen Redrow are able to do it, and obviously able to do it within their parameters in terms of creating margin and profit. I see no reason why that discussion shouldn't take place. I fully accept we can't compel, but I think there needs to be that, rather than it's up to the developer, we need to be forcefully is probably the wrong word, but strongly saying that's what we desire, and it makes sense for not just for us, in terms of our views, but for future generations as well within our area. So I think it would be a very strong indicator of the developer wanting to work even more closely with us and the community. Thanks.
Can I just clarify, Chair, where we are with the request we made to defer it? One of the points that I made when I moved that was that it says in the report that one of the reasons why some of these access improvements to Brockholes were not done was because of the cost, and I feel we need to have the evidence to show how true that is. Some other issues have raised in the course of discussion on that, like the space standards, for instance. If we were to defer it, then maybe they could look at that in the process of doing it. I can't remember. I don't know that we can carry on the air source heat pump thing into a deferral, but I hear what you're saying. So I'm just checking that we're okay to deal with us as a so.
The only challenge with the crossing is where would you land it, and that's the point over the water course. So I think that's some of the driving issues as opposed to the.
Can I just seek clarification, because this is one of the problems of not having been on the site visit. Is it possible to use the existing road that goes there? What's it called? Sorry, Smithy Place Lane. Yeah.
Pedestrians would join that, which is a public right of way, and we would head down towards the Brockholes. That section of the prow is a public right of way. Will be hard surface with tarmac surface. We had proposed for it to be lit, but it isn't going to be lit now. The issue that members are raising is when it gets to Smithy Place Lane. It's when it joins that, which is the vehicular route between Woodhead Road and Brockhole and New Mill Road and Brockholes. Is that is a narrow section of road with no dedicated pedestrian provision, and pedestrians and vehicles will be using the same section of road for a length of about 37 metres before they then gain a footway. And it's that, I suppose, what members are saying is the increase in pedestrian movements that we'd hope to get, with people walking from the site to Brockhole School, etc., and possibly the station, coming into conflict with cars that are using Smithy Place Lane. And it's the nature of Smithy Place Lane and its width that there isn't. When we looked at it, there wasn't room to provide a meaningful, physical, dedicated pedestrian route in there without narrowing the carriageway to a point where you probably couldn't get two-way vehicle movement. Right, I can't say. Oh, see over there. Yeah.
But this goes back to the original point that I made. The address of this site is Brockholes, not Honley, and to create a connection, a decent connection with Brockholes, does seem to me to be important. Now, I do remember a site that we dealt with quite a long time ago now. I went on my own site visit there, South Crossland, no, not South Crossland, between Crossland Moor and Honley, and in order to, I noticed when I went on this side a lot of school children walking down this road. Which way were they coming? Probably from Honley up the hill towards Crossland Moor on an ordinary road. There were a lot of them, so that there are clearly places where this happens. And yes, I think on that particular road, I don't remember its name, but on that particular road, there were warnings to drivers to beware of pedestrians. So it does seem to me that these sorts of things can be mitigated. I rest my case. Sorry, I apologise if I'm not explaining it very well, but it did occur to me at the time when I saw all these school children on that road.
On site visit, really was plain that, photographs there. There's no way to put a path, unfortunately. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of observations and comments. One is that it looks like one of those sites that we would look forward to doing the review of the local plan for. It almost looks like we're trying to put a 50p piece in a 5p slot, and it really doesn't seem to work. I remember only a few months ago where planning were were reviewing a sports facility in East Bailey, but demanded that there was a footpath from the field to an adjoining footpath for the safety of pedestrians. But now we're looking at a road that'll barely take 2 vehicles and has got no safety for pedestrians whatsoever if they're walking, well, wherever they're going to be walking off the estate down to a local school that's planned, etc. So to me, none of it seems to fit well as far as child safety on the roads, or pedestrian safety, or even vehicle safety either. And if it's not anything that can be dealt with or mitigated, then obviously it's the wrong plan in the wrong place, and therefore I don't think I will be able to support it. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, could I just interrupt 1 second? We didn't take your declarations of interest, Councillor Thompson, because you were late into the meeting. Item 3 of the agenda. Did you have any interest to declare? No, thank you.
It's a hard one, isn't it? It is a hard one. To meet the tests of a planning condition, it's got to be reasonable, it's got to be enforceable, it's got to be necessary, it's got to be relevant. I think the challenge we've got is meeting those tests in fullness with a scheme that everyone recognises a footpath would be a benefit, and everybody has tried to achieve one, but we can't quite get one in. I think you can get lighting in, and I think members of the committee could request that. You've got a signage scheme. I don't think we can bring anything different. That's my worry about deferring on that point. And then the point I was raising, Councillor Pinnock, about where you would land at a separate route is over the watercourse to get a different point, and that's not practical because of multiple ownership issues. So those are the fundamentals. It is the nature of our topography in our valleys that we do have narrow carriageways and challenging sites. So we're in a bit of a place where you've got a scheme, it's been assessed by the engineers, it doesn't do everything you want, I do recognise that. So I come back to the planning balance, and unfortunately this is one where I'd ask you to consider the balance of the benefits versus the disbenefits, and arrive at a balanced position on the acceptability or otherwise. That's probably my best advice at the minute. I'm sorry if I haven't got a magic wand on this one. I'm sorry, Chair.
Sorry, I'm just trying to summarise where we are. We've had a proposal to defer. We've been discussing or talking about what we might be able to defer the item on. We've heard from technical officers in respect of highways that effectively the topography, you know, they've done the best that they possibly can in terms of technical things. Biodiversity was raised and that's conditioned. The pumps have been raised and again that's been dealt with. So what I'm left with now is enhanced sizes for 7 plots and lighting. So that could be part of the recommendation to go with the officer approval subject to delegation back to officers to renegotiate those plot sizes and renegotiate lighting issues. So that would be an amendment to the officer recommendation, or we go with the deferral, but the applicant really needs to know what he's got to come back with.
Thank you, Chair. I do think it will be difficult to defer this on the grounds that there is a river which is not easy to navigate, but which does put a natural barrier between this site and Brockholes. And yes, there is a school and a railway station the other side of the river, but to be honest, whilst its address may be Brockholes, I do wonder whether or not people living on this estate, if it were built, would be actually more looking towards Honley as its services, certainly its restaurants, sorry, Brockholes, and its petrol station and all sort of thing. They would have a natural inclination, I think, to look towards Honley as their village, as opposed to Brockholes, albeit that they would be able to see Brockholes, no doubt, and there is the school and the railway station. We wouldn't be able to stop children from the estate walking across that bridge anyway, whatever we did. And I think it is difficult to defer on that one particular point. I certainly would like to include the lighting and the the space sizes in any recommendation if we did move this or go with the recommendations of the officers. And to be honest, if those can be added, I will move that we do accept the officer recommendations with the lighting and the size standards of those 7 properties be added to it. Thank you.
I think Carol's essentially covered the point I was going to raise. I think and thanks to the officers for the clarification. It seems very evident, unfortunately, that we can't pull together another footpath because of the crossing. Certainly the conditions around the lighting, the size. There's a point I was going to raise anyway. Should be put in there. And as I said earlier, I accept that we can't put any compulsion around the air source, but certainly at least that comment's been made, and I would ask that if this is accepted, that our planners have another discussion with the developers on that as well. I think that in itself would be a great sign, as I said, the community of the developers doing something which is progressive and looking forward. So yeah, I don't think we can defer at this point. So I would second Carol's motion.
Two things on table.
Who seconds defer? Who seconds defer?
Well, seconded deferral.
Are you now retracting that second delegate?
I never actually seconded. I actually said I wasn't sure whether we should defer or not in the first time. So I wanted to hear from officers.
I mean, I hear what is said about what the conditions would actually include, but we haven't had the chance to inspect what those conditions are. So I personally would still want it deferred. Otherwise, I'll just have to vote against it because I can't. It's not, as it stands at the moment, it's not acceptable to me.
In deferring it because he wants to see this list of costs. No, they're in. So, try and cobble something together now.
So the proposal from Councillor Pinnock is to defer to interrogate the conditions and also the costs associated with the providing highways matters, right? So costs evidence and interrogate the conditions, a deferral proposal. We're going to take your proposal, Councillor Patterson, which is officer recommendation subject to a delegation back to officers to renegotiate provision of lighting on Smithy Place, which is the Prow, the enhancement of the 7 plots. Somebody will give me the numbers eventually, but there are 7, and to discuss opportunities for air source pumps and other sustainability measures for the houses. Delegated back to officers.
And it's being moved and seconded when I find it by Councillor Patterson and Councillor Davis. So we'll go to a vote.
Just
just a reminder that your microphones will be turned on for you. Councillor Davis?
For.
Councillor Thompson?
For.
Councillor Sokol?
Yeah. No, you didn't need to press.
You don't need to press the button, yeah. Councillor Patterson?
For.
Councillor Omer?
For.
Councillor Pinnock?
Against.
Councillor Hall?
For.
Okay, so that's delegated to officers.
I don't know. Are you all right, Mona? Do you want 5 minutes? Or shall we back? You want 5 minutes? Right, we'll have 5 minutes out. So we'll. Right, welcome back. Just a reminder, those high-pitched squeakings that we've been getting through speakers, apparently there's about 350 stray dogs outside. Seems to be rather noisy. Can I just remind you that when you finish speaking, to switch your mic off, because it looks as though two mics are being switched on at the same time and it's causing a feedback. And Tom and Phil are going to try and help things out as well. So, anyway, let's crack on. Right, Bradford Road, Birkinshaw, West Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service Headquarters, a new training centre. Tell me, who's doing it? David.
Thank you, Chair. Members, item 13 on pages 1, 2, 3 to 144 of the main agenda. The applicant is West Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service. The site is Bradford Road at Birkinshaw. The application comprises demolition of the existing training centre and occupation health buildings to enable the erection of a new headquarters and indoor training centre, as well as an extension of an existing building to form a new fire station. The proposal is supported by increased car parking, associated landscaping improvements and upgraded sustainable drainage on and serving the site. There's an echo. The site is located at Oakroyd Hall in Birkinshaw, west of Bradford Road and east of the M62. The aerial plan presents the existing site layout. The buildings affected are numbers 3, 7 and 9, which comprise of the training centre HQ facility, which is 3 and 7, and the urban search and rescue building, number 9. The HQ and training centre are all to be accessed from Bradford Road, while the fire station is to be served from Whitehall Road West, which traverses the site's southern boundary. The site is well screened from existing properties across its eastern and southern flanks by mature tree cover. A residential estate is located across the northern site boundary between building 1 and 3. Open countryside is located to the west and east, though the western area is designated for residential development in the local plan. In terms of the site layout, this slide presents the proposal. Members can see that the proposed HQ and training centre building generally follows the footprint of the existing facility, but it is slightly larger. The extension to the urban search and rescue building to form the new fire station is visible on the bottom left side of the plan. The scheme is supported by a hard and soft landscaping plan to create more parking, as well as attractive outdoor communal spaces for seating and enjoyment. Further details on management of the landscaping would be conditioned as part of the recommendation. This slide presents some photos of the existing HQ and training centre. The HQ is the 4-storey building. The training centre is a single-storey garage building with mono-pitch roof. It's evident from the building that the buildings are beyond their intended lifespan and that the site is in need of an update to bring it into modern requirements for the fire service and their operation. This slide presents a render of the replacement headquarters and training centre. The building footprint, as well as its height and mass, are brutally reflective of the existing buildings, albeit far more sensitively designed. Members may be able to make out on the right-hand side of the image that the HQ building is somewhat built into the hillside relative to the residential properties further north of the site. Though the building is closer to these properties than the existing building, it is lower, and views to residential curtilages are oblique and indirect from the proposed windows, which also benefit from ample separation distances to preserve residential amenity. The ground floor of the HQ building is to consist of modern amenities such as an atrium, gym, conference space, cafe, shower room, etc. The first and second floors are to house offices and meeting rooms to serve the function of West Yorkshire Fire Services operation. The training centre will include a number of classrooms and large open space for vehicular training and maintenance. The floor space available increases from 2,100 square metres to existing to 2,700 square metres. This equates to a 22% floor space increase. In respect of the palette of materials proposed, aluminium cladding and dark blue bricks are proposed to the training centre's elevations and vertical brick header details to the curtain wall, which is intended to add interest and texture to the facade. Buff brick presented on the right-hand side of the slide is to face the elevations of the HQ. The windows on the HQ are to be set within the reveal, which ensure that the building's fenestrative elements add positivity to its appearance. This slide presents site imagery of the urban search and rescue building. The left-hand image is from within the site, the right-hand image is taken from Whitehall Road. An extension is proposed to the building to create a fire station for emergency services egressing onto Whitehall Road. In terms of the fire station, the extension to the building will be composed of matching materials. Use of the fire station in this location has been agreed with Environmental Health following submission of a noise report confirming that sirens will not be used on egress from the site. A condition would be added requiring further details of the use of sirens by emergency vehicles in the surrounding area. In terms of the drainage for the site, the LLFA, the Council's drainage team, have withdrawn their objection and have confirmed that the updated flood risk assessment provides a reduced discharge rate off-site of 44 litres per second, which meets the 30% runoff reduction requirement of policy LP28 surface water drainage. The drainage design provides an underground storage solution beneath the car park north of the training centre and outfalls to the existing combined sewer on Bradford Road further east. More information relating to drainage has been detailed in the committee update report. In respect of highway and transport matters, there are no objections to the proposal from Highways Development Management, subject to conditions. Existing accesses are utilised that have adequate visibility. There is increased parking on site to cater for specific and infrequent event days in which minimise on-street parking disruption to the local network, which is welcomed. In respect of highway capacity, the development is to incur only a modest uplift in trip generation that is well within the Bradford Road, Whitehall Road roundabout operational capacity. In respect of ground stability matters, a condition has been provided in consultation with the Coal Authority to locate grout and cap recorded mine shafts on the site. Members will see in the agenda update references made to amending the condition that requires provision of a 10% biodiversity net gain. This paragraph is incorrect, unfortunately, as the 10% requirement is included in Kirklees BNG Technical Advice Note that was adopted in June 2021. Whilst the applicant's scheme is likely to exceed the 10% biodiversity net gain, officers require this to be controlled by condition. In conclusion, the application for replacement headquarters and training centre, as well as the siting of the new fire station at Berkshire, is recommended for approval to officers given the proposed development's significant benefits in respect of design and its limited impacts in respect of highway safety, capacity and residential amenity. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, David. We've got one speaker, and that's Claire Plant.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here on behalf of West Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service to support the officer recommendation relating to this application. The proposals for the redevelopment of this site are to replace a dilapidated set of buildings at the end of their lifespan with a modern, efficient and sustainable new headquarter facility. This will support the future employment and training of staff across the West Yorkshire Service, as well as providing a new fire station for the area. In planning policy terms, the proposed use is acceptable within the site. The proposals have been designed to enhance the visual appearance of the site and also to provide enhanced landscaping and tree planting. The relationship with the nearest residential properties, which are set behind a stone boundary to the north, has been carefully considered and confirmed as acceptable. Other matters of noise, air quality, highways impact, ecology, construction management and drainage have all been fully assessed and also deemed to be acceptable. We've undertaken productive pre-application discussion with officers, as well as extensive public consultation with both residents and local ward members, whose comments have informed the final proposals. The redevelopment will provide facilities to best support a modern-day fire service, and would strongly encourage members to support the application. Thank you, Chair.
Members, over to you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple. Steve.
Yeah.
Just a couple of assurances needed. One is that the lighting on the new buildings are not going to encroach on any of the houses, the residents' houses over Whitehall Road East, Whitehall Road West, and also Bradford Road facing the fire station. So that was one assurance. And the other, that the Oakroyd house is, when sold, it's going to be sold as a listed building, which it is at the moment. One was a question, which is, if it's going to be sold as a residence, where would the access to that be? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I of course have a bit of sour grapes here because the fire station that is to be built at Birkenshaw is to replace the one in Cleckheaton. This despite the displeasure, at least of some of the local residents in Cleckheaton, as well as the ward members. But be that as it may, that has happened, and I trust that the new fire station in Birkenshaw will be able to react in the way that we were assured when we were talking to the fire service officers during the time of consultation. One or two points that came up, something to do with sirens. I'm not quite clear if the fire engine was trying to get out onto Whitehall Road and there was a queue of traffic, it would surely have to use its siren in order to get through the queue. So I'm not quite sure what the restriction on using sirens actually means, because there are houses on the other side of Whitehall Road West as well. Can I just draw your attention to the list of conditions? Condition 3 is the construction management plan, and I know this is not a housing site, but this site has got houses around it. I do think that the consultation with local residents should be written into this as it is to housing applications, because to some extent some of the building works will affect local residents, and I think they need to be involved if there's anything going on that would affect their quality of life. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Chair, I'm fully in support of this application to replacement the old building with the new purpose-built building. It certainly will improve the area and improve the training facility for the fire recruitment over there. But I'm a bit concerned, I was looking at the back history of planning history of this place. I was looking in the last 20 years, we received 8 applications and 8 times we granted planning permission, some or other way, but never been implemented, I think, or implemented, I don't know, it doesn't say on here. But I want to know when this, if we approve this application today, will this scheme will be implemented or just leave it there? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I can take the earlier points first, and then I might have to ask one of the other officers about that point. Thank you, Chair. So, in terms of the lighting, officers are recommending that a condition is added to any approval, so that a lighting scheme would have to be submitted, and that would be assessed by environmental protection and the planning officers to ensure that there wasn't harm to residential amenity. In terms of the access to Oakroyd Hall, as and when a scheme comes in for that particular part of the site, whilst we would have to assess every scheme on its merits, and I can't assess at this particular time where the definitive access would be, it would make sense really to come off Bradford Road, because there's an existing access that forms Oakroyd Drive, so we would assume that it would come off that element, but I will have to wait for a forthcoming plan in the future. In terms of the last point from Councillor Sokol, I'm sorry, I couldn't understand what you were asking. Could you make that point again, unless you know, Matthias?
Yeah, I just mentioned, I was looking at the planning history of this building, and in last 20 years, we received at least 8 or 9 applications, and we all have been granted planning permission of those of different type, but I'm not sure those planning permission were implemented or not. But now we got this planning application, completely replacement of the old building with new one. So I'm just asking whether they will go ahead with this one if we approve today.
I was talking to somebody last night, and they said, good, let's get on with it, and that's somebody who is somebody. I'm not telling you it will, but it'll happen. Anybody want to move it, second it? Right, it's being moved by Councillor Soap, seconded by Councillor Thompson, so we'll go to a vote.
Councillor Davis?
For.
Councillor Thompson?
For.
Councillor Sokol?
For.
Councillor Patterson?
For.
Councillor Armour?
For.
Councillor Pinnock?
For.
Councillor Hall?
For. Right, next page 145, and this is Low Farm, Wakefield Road at Flockton. Nick.
Thank you, Chair. Good day, councillors. Yep, my name's Nick Hurst, case officer for this application. This proposal seeks full planning permission for the erection of a solar farm that would produce 49.9 megawatts of energy to supply the national grid. The permission would be temporary, with the applicant seeking a period of 40 years. The application site covers an area of 89.6 hectares of greenbelt land and is cross-boundary submission, encroaching into Wakefield. The works in Wakefield are limited, consisting of subterranean cabling to link the site to the national grid point of connection at Ladies Inn Farm, east of Middleton. All of the solar panels would be within Kirklees. Sorry, this plan currently shows that. So if you just follow the dotted line, that is the route the subterranean cable would take before it connects into the national grid here. But the vast majority of the site is within the Kirklees boundary to the left of this line. Because it's cross-boundary, a separate application has been submitted to Wakefield Local Planning Authority. At their last meeting, Wakefield Planning Committee have devolved their decision-making powers to Kirklees Local Planning Authority for this application. The site consists of 9 parcels of agricultural land. The agriculture is predominantly arable farming with some pasture use. The site and the wider area has a gentle undulating landform with an overall fall from the southwest to northeast. The boundaries of the parcels are formed by a combination of hedgerow, often with frequent hedgerow trees, tree belt and woodland. Much of the land between the different parcels is also wooded, with 2 areas of ancient woodland to the north. And the first area of ancient woodland is this one here, and then this separate parcel here. Wakefield Road bisects the site, and you can just see it cutting through there where the arrows are. This plan shows a proposed layout. The solar panels will be laid in parallel rows across 8 of the parcels. The 9th parcel would host a substation, a facility necessary for the process of connecting electricity to the national grid. Within the parcels, the solar panels would cover 58.4 hectares, or approximately 65% of the site. This does not take into account the gaps between the parallel rows of the panels. The land not dedicated to panels would be a mixture of ecological enhancement areas, buffer zones and access arrangements. The yellow lines on these plans are public rights of way, which include part of the Kirklees Way. So the yellow lines you can see, and then cutting this field up. The development would not interfere with or require the diversion of any of the established public rights of ways. However, the development would be perceptible by footpath users. So this plan shows the design of the photovoltaic panels. The panels would be fixed and would not rotate with the sun. They would be installed upon a metal frame with legs that are driven into the ground without the need for concrete, so can be removed. The panels will be laid in straight lines of varied length, laid east to west and parallel to the other rows with a gap of approximately 5 metres between each row. Each panel's lowest point would be 1 metre from the ground and the highest would be 2.8 metres to the top. Utility structures are required to enable the development. This includes 17 transformers that would be sited within containers interspaced throughout the development, and they would be fitted within shipping containers. A substation compound would also be required and will be sited within parcel 9, and this is the substation compound on the side here. This image shows a typical section of the edge of each parcel. It should, however, be noted that most of the parcels would not be immediately adjacent to publicly accessible land. It should also be noted that this image is not to scale, but is a good indicator of how it would be laid out. Each parcel would have a vegetated boundary of hedgerow, some with additional tree planting with sensitive boundaries having additional layers of screening. Behind the vegetated boundary would be a 2 metre high deer fence, followed by a 5 metre buffer zone before the panels are laid out. All public rights of ways and footpaths that are adjacent to the development would be screened by some form of hedgerow or vegetation. So this image shows the indicative landscaping details, including the enhanced vegetated boundary treatments. For example, the orange denotes existing vegetated field boundaries which would be improved and thickened. So to pick some of them out, you've got along there, along these edges, while the purple would be entirely new tree and shrub belt planting. In addition to this, the proposal includes ecological enhancement works that would increase the site's ecological value using the Deferment gain calculator by 94.8% for habitat units and 32% for hedgerow units. So the following images are taken from the applicant's landscape visual impact assessment and aim to show the impact of the development over time. The top image shows the current site, while the lower image shows the site after 1 year. Evidently, as a close range photo, it is going to be quite prominently visible from here. This image shows the same location after 15 years of vegetation growth. The vegetation is expected to take between 10 to 15 years to reach maturity. These images show a more distant arrangement. Again, the top shows the existing arrangement and the lower after 1 year, so you can just see an encroachment on the ridgeline there. And again, after 15 years, once the vegetation has grown, it would form a screen. So, the report before members outlines officers' full assessment of the proposal. This application requires an assessment on the planning balance, weighing up the positive and negative elements of the proposal. I shall therefore focus my summary upon the negative and positive aspects of the proposal. Material considerations deemed to have a neutral impact shall not be raised, but are covered in detail within the report. So, starting off with the negative elements of the proposal is within the Greenbelt and would be inappropriate development. Planning policy is clear that, by definition, inappropriate development is harmful to the Greenbelt. Furthermore, the proposal would harm the openness to the Greenbelt and conflict with one of the Greenbelt's core purposes to prevent urban sprawl by keeping land permanently open. Openness is defined as a defining character of the Greenbelt and may be considered to be the absence of buildings and development. Through introducing substantial man-made features over a large area, this key characteristic would be eroded, and the proposal has the potential to cause substantial harm to openness. However, the impact of the openness is mitigated through the specifics of the proposal. The area's undulating topography and strong tree cover serve to substantially limit near and distant views of the site. The impact would be further mitigated through the additional landscaping proposed. Additionally, the proposal would be temporary in nature, albeit for a period of 40 years. Nonetheless, the temporary nature would ensure that the site would return to its current open state after this period. These factors effectively limit the proposal's harm to the Greenbelt. For other harm, the proposal would be sited near to several heritage assets which would have their settings affected through the introduction of new development nearby. Through introducing the proposed development within their otherwise open setting, altering how the assets are viewed, harm would be caused. Officers have considered this harm would be less than substantial, however, by virtue of the distance and proposed screening. Finally, for harm, the proposal would be built upon 15 hectares of agricultural land which falls within the best and most versatile agricultural land, which development should be steered away from. The rest of the site is not categorised as best and most versatile land from an agricultural point of view. National food security is relevant, and best and most versatile agricultural land is the most productive for food growth. However, the 15 hectares falls within the lowest category of the best and most versatile land, with that category system being 1, 2, 3A, 3B, 4 and 5. This land is 3A. Furthermore, the site would retain an agricultural use through sheep grazing, while the prolonged break from arable farming will result in soil improvements during the temporary period of this development. Therefore, while harm would be caused through the loss of the agricultural land, officers considered the harm to be mitigated to limited harm. Turning to the benefits, firstly, the proposal would generate 49.9 megawatts of renewable energy that would be supplied to the national grid. This would be an important contribution towards addressing the climate emergency that the Council has declared, and towards meeting local and national policy on reducing carbon emissions, addressing climate change, and meeting the UK's obligation under the Paris Agreement of 2016. Secondly, the development would benefit the natural environment on the site itself by allowing the soil that has long been intensely farmed to rest and rejuvenate under grass for 40 years. It would also bring about significant net gain in biodiversity on the site, and that's 94.8% habitat units and 32% hedgerow units. This would benefit not only the site but the adjacent land and wider habitat networks. Finally, a consideration for an education strategy is recommended to ensure that the proposal plays a social role via the education of the local community over the nature and benefits of the proposal and renewable energy. Officers have assessed these points carefully along with the public representations received. In total 52 public representations in opposition were received and have been addressed within the report. Officers do acknowledge the harm that the proposal would cause, but consider on the planning balance that the public benefits of the proposal would clearly outweigh the identified harm and may be considered to be very special circumstances that justify this development within the Greenbelt. It is therefore recommended that the application is approved. If minded to approve, a consultation with the Secretary of State would be necessary due to the scale of development within the Greenbelt that would be inappropriate development. This is to give the Secretary of State the opportunity to consider whether to exercise their call-in powers. Nothing further to add, Chair.
Thanks, Nick. We've got two speakers. First speaker is Mike Creighton.
Thank you, and thank you for your time. I live at Denby Grange Lane, which forms part of the western boundary of the proposed solar site. I appear as a resident, but also in my professional capacity. I'm a farm business consultant with 43 years of experience, previously the senior partner of the largest dedicated UK farm business consultancy. I now trade as expert agriculture with clients throughout England and Wales. I'm also the chief executive of the British Institute of Agricultural Consultants and a Fellow of the Agricultural Law Association. I believe I'm qualified to address you in this matter. I understand and get involved in solar production. 20 years ago, I assisted a client install a scheme in Norfolk. I'm currently instructed to negotiate a significant solar scheme on behalf of a client in Sheffield. I'm not against solar, but I am against the low farm solar scheme. Under the Town and Country Planning Act 1990, local planning authorities are responsible for renewable schemes of 50 megawatts or less of installed capacity. Schemes over 50 megawatts capacity are considered by the Secretary of State of Energy and the Department of Energy and Climate Change, who make the final determination. This scheme has a generating capacity that exceeds 50 megawatts. It's important that we all understand generating capacity. Generating capacity is determined by the number, size and capacity of the solar panels. A previous plan of the site identified the generating capacity as 66 megawatts, suggesting the site is 32% larger than it should be. Boom say this was a mistake. I can assure you the generating capacity exceeds 50 megawatts. I accept that inverters will be part of the scheme, and these ensure the site does not deliver, the case officer's words, produce any more than 50 megawatts at any point in time. But this is not the generating capacity, which is what governs your right to determine this application. Boom want a scheme with excess generating capacity because that ensures a solar farm will deliver 50 megawatts when the weather is not at its best, and achieving greater capacity, which in turn means more land is taken, which has a detrimental effect on the public and environment. There is precious little agricultural land between Wakefield and Huddersfield. The area of panels is 149 acres. The site is 220 acres. Quite frankly, this is the wrong development on the wrong site. It's shaded by trees. At least one area is north-facing, and it involves 12 individual blocks of land. There are better sites that would allow a 50 megawatt scheme on a smaller area of land.
Thank you. Next is Jack Spurway.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. This is a carefully chosen site. We have worked hard with council officers, consultees and experts to ensure that we've got this right. Statutory and non-statutory consultees have no objection to this development. The development offers the opportunity to help, in part, to address some of the key challenges facing our society. Globally, countries and organisations recognise that we are in the midst of a climate emergency, with the IPCC stating in 2021 that it is unequivocal that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, ocean and land. We must change the way that we get energy now. Locally, Kirklees Council declared a climate emergency in 2019, determining that we all must take urgent action to improve and protect our environment. In doing so, your authority recognises carbon emissions are now causing an overall warming of the planet, with corresponding devastating impacts starting to be felt. This development offers the opportunity to secure a renewable energy scheme with a generation capacity of 49.9 megawatts. Annually, this will offset 23,300 tonnes of carbon dioxide emissions, whilst meeting the electrical needs of 15,200 homes. Consenting this application would help to achieve the net zero target set by your authority for 2038. In April, partly in response to the crisis in the Ukraine, the government announced a new British energy security strategy aiming to secure clean and affordable British energy that isn't dependent on foreign countries. This development, and others like it, will contribute to the delivery of the British energy security strategy and deliver homegrown renewable energy. We are all living through a cost of living crisis. This is fuelled in part by rising energy costs. Annual energy bills for UK households have already risen by 54% this year, with further rises predicted in October and January next year. Solar PV currently represents the cheapest and quickest to deploy form of energy generation in the UK. Put simply, the more solar that is present in the UK energy mix, the cheaper our bills will be. In the UK, a study by the Natural History Museum has revealed that with just half of our biodiversity remaining, this is one of the most nature-depleted countries in the world. As well as providing renewable energy, this development will deliver much-needed gains for biodiversity, far exceeding the 10% that is usually expected of new developments. Whilst delivering these gains for biodiversity, the land will remain in agricultural use through the grazing of sheep, and the landowner's wider agricultural operations will be supported. This is in line with the National Food Strategy Review, which found that solar farms do not present a risk to food security in the UK. They provide a consistent income for landowners with little volatility, allowing for long-term financial planning and investments to be made, improving the security of agricultural operations. In summary, this development has passed through a detailed design phase, ensuring that any negative impacts will be avoided or mitigated. The case officer's report sets out the many positives that can be secured because of this scheme, and I ask you to approve the development in line with his recommendations. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just make sure that we've got something legal here, because evidence has been given to us to show that we should be looking at the installed capacity of the site, not its generating capacity. And I rather gather from what we've been told that the installed capacity is above what we should be, what we have powers to approve. Can I seek clarification on that point, please?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. If you look at the recommendation, it's a recommendation to delegate the Head of Planning and Development to notify the Secretary of State of our intention to approve. So they will have the power then to call it in if we are mistaken. It's a moot point, really.
Make sure that we know what we're doing, that in fact the installed capacity is above the level that we are supposed to look at. Is that right?
Through you, Chair. So the wording of the Act is capacity. It doesn't specify installed capacity. Looking at it now, I think in terms of reassurance, what we have is the description of development states 49.9%. We will also be imposing a condition of 49.9 megawatts. There will also be a condition of 49.9, which will link into the power plant control system that the applicant has that will govern how much energy is produced at a time. And thirdly, as Deborah has pointed out, if minded to approve, because this is the scale of development in the Greenbelt, we have to take it to the Secretary of State. In that, given the concerns that have been raised, we think it's right to bring this up to the Secretary of State, say there is this point of contention. If they say we have it wrong or the applicant has it wrong, they will then have the power to take it from us or dictate or control it as necessary. So we've got 3 levels of reassurance. Through you, Chair, I don't know if you would like to bring in the applicant to mention this in their experience in other solar farms.
I'd like to agree with what the case officer said. You know, there's 3 levels of security from the council's point of view, and this is a 49.9 megawatt scheme that's before you today.
And can I just ask something else, please, Chair? And that is, if the Secretary of State decided that yes, it's too big, would the Secretary of State then have the power to say, well, it should be reduced by X amount, but could still go ahead nevertheless?
Through you, Chair. So ultimately then that would be an application for the Secretary of State to consider. If they were to determine that it was 55, 60 or whatever, that would be what they would be assessing. They wouldn't necessarily say reduce it. They would have the power to assess a 55 megawatt scheme. So it would be all internal for them then. We would be a consultant, so we would advise on it, but it would be their decision at the end of the day.
Thank you. Yes, now we've got the legal position more or less sorted out. Coming to practical measures. I think the best thing I can say about this application is it's better than having 500 houses built on the field. That's just a personal opinion. What I would like, I noticed a lot of hedgerow involved, which is good. It's good for natural habitat. But I'm not just certain over the 40 years or so of life for this project, who's going to be doing the regular ongoing maintenance of these hedges. We don't want to see them left to just become totally wild and overgrown. So have we got any provision for ongoing maintenance?
Through you, Chair, a condition is recommended for a management and maintenance strategy. Unlike, say, a housing scheme, Boom will have a ongoing investment in this site, so they will be on this site throughout its entire lifetime. Also, from an ecological point of view, the ecological net gain needs to be secured over 30 years, so at a very minimum, the management and maintenance will be secured for 30 years, after which it would be up to them as landowners to manage it. Thank you.
Yeah, a question on the screening, the vegetation. I think from memory it was shown after a few years, then sort of came to full height about 15 years, I think, if I'm right. Surely we can explore something which is going to be a lot quicker than that in terms of height of vegetation that's actually planted, so that screening is up a lot quicker. I think it was 15, but if you could clarify.
Through you, Chair, ultimately there's no definitive, but approximately 10 to 15 years for a hedgerow to reach the level of screening that would be after here. Hedgerow can't be planted at a mature age. If you plant it at that, it doesn't take very well, it doesn't grow very thick. You need to plant hedgerow as young as possible so it grows and intermingles. What we would be looking for, ultimately the landscaping information so far is indicative. There will be a full detailed strategy coming forward as part of a condition. Certain boundaries, those that are considered the most sensitive, we would be looking for more mature trees along them. There's nothing we can do about the hedgerow. Ultimately, they need to be young trees. We can look at typical standard trees, which are a bit older than a whip or larger. So that is something we would be looking for. But the fact of the matter is, hedgerow does take time to grow, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just again, a couple of observations that the borough, I think we've got about 11,500 acres of farming land in the borough, and at the moment I think countrywide we're about 60% self-dependent with our food sources, which means 40% of our food has to come in from overseas, and at the moment seems to be a bit of a problem. So the other thing is about overworked land, I think was mentioned by Officer, but it's pasture land, which means it's grass for fodder, so I'm not sure that it can be overworked. The other thing is reference to solar panels being carbon, did somebody say carbon neutral or less carbon, but they do produce, I think is it 50 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour? So they do produce CO2 as well. But my biggest issue is the use of so much land for 49 kilowatt, is that right? Megawatt of electricity. It's a beautiful part of the borough. I don't think it's appropriate where it is. I think it's a waste of land that we can be using for food rather than for solar. I think the solars could be better placed elsewhere, as in not on a farm. And I think we should have a bit more of a long-term view on this as far as solar energy is concerned, rather than taking up desperately needed farming land than sticking solar panels on it for 40 years. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Chair, I just want to ask the officer, the benefit of the scheme will be mainly to the farmers or will be the local people as well?
Through you, Chair, the energy will go into the national grid, so it's not necessarily going to serve local residents. It'll just be the grid. Whether you view that as a local benefit or a national benefit, that's up to you. The other benefits, the ecological ones, would be felt by local people. That would be in a site and area benefit, and the education benefit I mentioned as well. We'd look to ultimately relatively new ground on that, but we want them to put forward to us a package that explains how they will help the local community and educate them the benefits of their proposal.
There is some concern raised by the objector. Later on, some of the tree will be felled. So can we put some condition? No tree will be felled.
Through you, Chair, most of the solar panels are sited within the fields themselves. So as part of this development, only one tree is to be felled and one area of hedgerow, and that's to cause access. The tree in question is not protected by TPO. Most of them surrounding the site are, and the hedgerow is again of limited quality. So given the scale of it, very limited tree loss, which will be more than outweighed by the replanting that will be going into the landscaping. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Just forgot something. Reference to the electric generated going into the national grid. I don't see how that's going to make our electricity any cheaper. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you. It seems to me we've got a choice here, obviously, between energy security. Well, maybe it isn't a choice between energy security and food production. I think we can probably balance the two. Both of them are important, obviously. And as I understand it, these fields are very largely in arable production at the moment. So in terms of agricultural practice, it seems like a good idea to let them be. Well, I don't know. Would they be fallow, or would there be any planting of grass on this site? I'll leave that question sort of hanging. But at any rate, the land will be used by grazing animals, which in itself, from an agricultural point of view, is a good thing, and will improve the health of the soil underground. I don't know whether we ought to have a condition that says we think that this should be monitored over the life of the solar panels are there, so that evidence can be produced to show how this system actually works. And of course, if you're grazing sheep on this land, then that is another agricultural product which will be added to the. It's not just food either, of course. To the products of the land. So on balance, I think once we've cleared up the legalities relating to this, I think there is a lot to be said for it.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, sort of following on from that, it does strike me as seems to be a pretty well balanced scheme. I think the biodiversity gains are really impressive. We've looked at other developments and we understand what happens with other developments. So I think that's certainly a positive. And as Councillor Pinnock said, the ongoing ability to be used in terms of grazing. Clearly, we're in huge need of renewable energy and also energy security. We've seen what's happened and what continues to happen when we have a reliance on energy from outside the country. So from that perspective, certainly, I'm supportive of the scheme. I can fully understand people's, reluctance, and there's part of me as well that's there is that reluctance to see so greenfield arable land in particular being used for this. But this is, it has got a balance to it in that regard, and it's certainly not a development that destroys the land. There's an element of protection in terms of the scheme as well. So I'm prepared to move the officer's recommendation on that basis.
Right. I'm going to say I'm quite prepared to second it. I think it's helping to safeguard land that we've already got by, like Bill said, not building houses on it, which I think is a good thing. Any more comments? Any more questions? So it has been moved and it has been seconded. We'll go to a vote.
Councillor Davies.
For.
Councillor Thompson.
Against.
Councillor Sokol.
For.
Councillor Patterson.
For.
Councillor Armour?
Against.
Councillor Pinnock?
For.
Councillor Hall?
For.
Okay, so that's carried, Chair.
Right, next page 189. This is treatment works at Oakenshaw, which we've been to my knowledge, must be 3 times. But we're going there again.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. This item is a Section 73 variation of condition application. It seeks to vary Condition 32 of Outline Application 2016-92298. That application has been followed by several reserve matters applications and development has commenced on the site. Therefore, it should be noted that this aerial image is out of date. As a quick overview of 2016-92298, it granted outline permission for employment use at the former North Biley wastewater treatment works. This is the parameters plan submitted as part of that application, and Condition 22 limits development to these plateau areas. The approved use comprises a mixture of B1, B2 and B8 employment use. This is the condition in question. In effect, it limits the site's floor area to 35,284 square metres and that the B2 use shall not exceed 75.8% of the floor space. The reason for this condition is to ensure no harm to the local and national highways network and was based on the transport statement submitted at the time. As noted, the site has benefited from several reserve matters. This image shows the current state of the site. Unit 1 has been built in this approximate area, while Unit 2, which is 2 separate buildings, are being built on this part of the site and are at different stages of completion. These 2 developments total 31,437 square metres of the approved 35,284 square metres of floor space. So this application seeks to increase the maximum floor space of the site to 41,161 square metres. That is an increase of 5,907 square metres and is an increase of 16.7%. The applicant justifies this by proposing a change in the ratio of proposed uses and their respective floor areas. Traffic movements are typically calculated using the National TRICS database system. Each use class has an anticipated traffic movement figure, which can be then increased, that then you apply the floor area, which then gives you the movement figures. The applicant contends that by lowering the B2 use, which has a relatively high traffic movement figure, and increasing the B8 use, which has a lower movement figure, there would be no material change in the traffic despite the increase in floor space. This table shows the results of the proposed increase in floor space and changes to the ratio. In summary, there will be 9 less movements in the AM peak and 3 less in the PM. Kirklees Highways have reviewed the applicant's methodology to reach this conclusion and consider the assessment to be sound. National Highways have likewise reviewed the proposal and offer no objection. In light of this, officers have no objection to the condition being amended, and the amended condition can be seen there. In short, the B2 cap would fall to 51.9% and the maximum floor space raised to that requested. A new condition is recommended to prevent the additional floor space being used as a parcel distribution centre, which would have a greater traffic impact than a typical B8 use and that which has been assessed. 5 public representations have been received in objection to this proposal. These are considered and addressed within the report. Officers therefore recommend approval of the application, subject to the given amendment and additional condition, and to the signing of a Section 106 agreement to secure the previous contribution secured by the 2016 application. Nothing further to add, Chair.
Thanks, Nick. Now then, I've got 3 names down here, but I only see 2 people. So, a case of elimination, I've got Charlie Brown. You've got 3 minutes starting from now.
Chair, members, I'd like to begin with a quote from the planning inspector. There are no exceptional circumstances to justify the removal of this site or any part of this site from the Greenbelt. As such, the proposed red line boundary for this development was rejected by the draft local plan. The outline delegated report was submitted to committee without accurate facts and figures, nor any mention of this rejection. It was also rejected later by the local plan. Somehow, it is now being used. The application was approved on a casting vote, with half the committee not having visited the site, and the chair admitted to having very little knowledge of the site. Pretty poor given the size and contentiousness of the development. The maximum floor space figure of 35,284 square metres did not come from a lucky bag. That was the footprint of the North Byerley Waterworks, a designated brownfield site. The floor space was limited to future-proof the green space, and the applicant has always known that. Kirklees Planning has now been enlisted to support a spurious interpretation of Condition 32. What is Condition 32? It actually sets the parameters for the type of use, I quote, to avoid an intensification in vehicle movement on the surrounding highway. What Condition 32 is not, it is not the conduit to increase the size of the development. The applicant is attempting to utilise a Section 73 submission to make a minor material change, and I question the legality of this approach. This minor material change will impact the green space by paving the way for a building the size of a football field. Is that a minor change? To be honest, I think only the applicant, the planning officer and probably Boris Johnson would interpret that way. The delegated report spouts on about traffic equilibrium based on 2011 data, but not a jot about the impact it's going to have on the green space. Why is that, I wonder? This development has been dogged by poor planning and change management. The applicant has failed to budget its floor space and has chosen to sell off larger plots to phases 2 and 4. This situation is totally self-inflicted. The applicant now seeks sympathy from Kirklees Planning because it can't find a client for the floor space left. The applicant has breached conditions throughout with scant regard for our community. And to add to that, I was threatened last week while gathering evidence against this. However, an unhealthy relationship with Kirklees Planning has prevented any consequence. What the applicant wants, the applicant gets. It's time for committee to do the right thing. Protect the green space, stop being wagged by the applicant's tail, and just for once, have some respect for the Oakenshaw community. This application must be rejected.
Thanks, Charlie. Next I've got Jeremy Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, members, my name is Jeremy Williams from ID Planning, acting on behalf of the applicant. As highlighted in the very detailed officer's report, which I wholly support, the proposal accords with the development plan, including all local and national policies. The officer report confirms that the application follows the council's long-standing intention to see the site developed for employment uses that resulted in the site being allocated for major employment development and the granting of the original outline application in 2018 and the approval of subsequent reserved matters. This application is a Section 73 application that simply seeks to vary the extent and implemented consent. The proposal is to decrease the amount of B2 uses and increase the potential quantum of B8 uses at the site. Such B8 uses are typically quieter than the B2 general industrial uses and generate fewer vehicle movements. As such, it has been demonstrated that the overall impact of the proposed development will be similar to that previously approved. As detailed in your officer's report, the Council's Highways officers has assessed the data in this respect and agreed with our findings. Officers state the proposed changes would have no materially greater impact upon the local highway network. To further ensure there is no material impact, a condition has been agreed to exclude last mile distribution uses. In addition, there are no objections from any of the technical consultees, therefore the proposals comply with adopted policy in all other respects. I can also confirm the applicant will imminently procure the off-site highway improvement works around the M606 via a payment to Kirklees Council as required by the approval. The Council will administer and deliver the works under a Section 278 agreement. These works will be carried out by a Kirklees and National Highways approved framework contractor. In summary, this is a site that has been considered appropriate for employment development for many years, and the Council have been supportive all through the local plan process and previous outline and reserve matters applications. The applicant is keen to continue the development of the site to ensure the delivery of the major new employment opportunities to be provided on the site in August 2023, when the buildings are scheduled for completion. I respectfully request you agree with the officer's recommendation and defer and delegate approval. Thank you.
Thank you. When this first came to committee, we got no figures at all in the committee reports as far as traffic generation was concerned. It was all done verbally, and I objected most strongly to this. It's not helpful, which is why I'm really glad that the figures are in this report. It's a pity that couldn't have been done in the first place. But it will not have escaped some people's attention that I actually voted against it when it was decided, simply because the amount of traffic movements I considered at the time was unacceptable as far as Oakenshaw is concerned. I mean, for those of you who remember the site, the access to it is actually quite tortuous, because you come out of the site onto a narrow lane, go along that a bit, and then it turns into another comparatively narrow lane, goes under the M606, and then joins Bradford Road in the middle of Oakenshaw. And the amount of vehicle movements that were described in the original report led me to think that this was something of an imposition, shall we say, on the people who live in the village. And every time I go there, I get complaints from people about what's been going on. Admittedly, what has been described by Mr. Brown is an enforcement matter, which I don't know whether it's still going on, but I'm sure Mr. Brown will get in touch with me if he wishes to. So what have we got here? We're being asked to vary specifically this one condition. On the face of it, I don't have a problem with that, because you could increase the size of of what's being developed, and it could have fewer traffic movements because it was a different use class. I mean, ideally, you wouldn't want to do that because as has been implied, there's enough building on that site already. You don't want any more. But I am particularly worried about the issue that is referred to in the report in relation to parcel distribution, shall we say, because that's in the same use class as warehouse distribution, and you could be approving an extension of B8 use because it has fewer traffic movements than B2 general industry, but only to discover that you've got a parcel distribution business which has actually got more vehicle movements, and therefore more vehicle movements into the middle of Oakenshaw, which is where all the traffic will have to go. You can't go up Cliff Hollins Lane, or at least not very easily, because the junction should be built so that it makes it very difficult to turn right out of the site. So But the thing that's been worrying me is what happens if you have a hybrid operation, somebody that's doing warehouse distribution but is also running a parcel operation. I think the condition that's worded here will need to be reworded so that it says something like there should be any part of this business must not be parcel distribution. I'm not quite sure how to put that, but I can see why that condition is there because the amount of vehicle movements out of the site when completed will be bad enough, but there is absolutely no necessity to make it worse. Absolutely no necessity at all. So I will wait to hear what other members say, but personally I want that condition strengthened so that it's made quite clear that no part of the business, even if it's mainly something else, there should be no parcel distribution. In other words, no use of small vans rather than lorries. I know that sounds a bit ironic, but in a way, better fewer lorries than a greater number of vans. But anyway, I'll leave what I have to say at that point and let other members have a go if they want to.
Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarification, one of the speakers mentioned that he thought that there was some greenbelt land being used that shouldn't, and could I have clarification on that and what that meant? And the other one is that, just looking at the plan, there is the ability to use Cliff Hollins Lane, which I'm really concerned about, seeing as we've got another 2 depots in our ward, which is TNT and Ocado, and it looks like that they could use Cliff Hollins Lane as a rat run, which I'd be really, really concerned about, so I'd need some guarantees that that couldn't happen. Thank you, Chair.
Through you, Chair, just to come back on Councillor Pinnock's point, first of all, I would just ask the Councillor, are you looking at the condition in the update or as originally drafted in the report? Because the condition was refined in the update, so it might be more to your liking. Well, I'll give you a second to have a look at that. And
then it will be more to my liking, yes.
So, during the local plan, the red line for the outline application was predominantly taken out with the green belt and was an employment allocation. Part of the red line is within the green belt, but the development plateaus of the plan that I showed you before and I can put up is outside of the green belt. So the area where this development would be sited, the area 3, if you recall that plan, that is not within the green belt. Sorry, this development plateau where this additional floor space would be built on would not be in the green belt. No.
So there's no additional green belt being used on this application?
No, the red line is established by the 2016 outline, so that line is as it was. So no, the development plateaus are not within the green belt. So I can show a plan if that would help, Councillor. Yeah. So this should now be sharing. Yeah. So the plan before you is the development plateaus from the 2016 application. So the red line is what was which I'm tracing now, was submitted with the 2016 application, but the development plateaus is the employment allocation. So this here is the employment allocation and is not green belt. And again, I'll just go back to this plan here. So the future development area 3 is where the floor space would most likely be built, given that 1 and 2 have been built on already. So this is not within the green belt.
I recall this history. the site was granted outline planning permission before the local plan was adopted, when it was Greenbelt, when it was the wastewater treatment site in the Greenbelt. So it had planning permission on Greenbelt land, and then the local plan process followed, and the allocation was drawn then. So there's still a bit of Greenbelt, I think, in the left-hand corner between where it says number 2 and the houses. And that was to protect the merger of settlements. Is that helpful?
More comments? On this, just a minute. I don't usually, when you've spoken, that's it. But seeing as we're quiet today, yeah.
Oh, so I appreciate the planning officer's outline plan that was up on there, but part of the agreement to accepting that hybrid red line boundary was to restrict the maximum floor space to the original size of the brownfield site. The green belt, yes, it was taken over by development in line with the current policy. The green belt became green space. What they're now taking away is further green space, which was allocated for other sort of, well, basically to maintain that green space. It wasn't for further development. The restriction was placed on that site for the original 35,284 square metres of floor space. That was the maximum agreed by council and developer, but now they just want them all.
Well, that's what the Section 73 application process allows, a further revisiting of the information. Members can choose to accept it, can choose to refuse it, but the applicant's entitled to make an application to amend planning permissions. That's what the good planning system allows. So it's due process is happening. It's up to the committee now whether they want to accept it or reject it.
Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask the planning officer if it's at all possible to show what this increase in maximum floor area would actually look like? It might not be that easy, but I think to kind of reassure Mr. Brown, at least to some extent, if it can be shown what sort of impact this level of increase will have physically.
Okay, so this is the best plan we can talk through today. So it's difficult because if you look at the size of the unit, you've got to add 4,000 square metres onto that. What percentage of building is that? It's my maths isn't great. Is it an eighth, roughly? So we haven't got a plan. We can show you here and now. Sorry. So you're sort of just adding 4,000 square metres on.
It's not. You're actually adding on 6,000 square metres, yeah, which is about the size of a football field.
What I was going to say was that if considering we are talking about increasing the size of the buildings, whether any further landscaping can be put in to help minimise the impact of that, so that even though there is more building there, the landscape is softened at least to an extent, because you know, don't get this wrong, the figures, the estimated figures here do show that the traffic impact, and that's what most affects the surrounding area, will be largely neutral. So I just want some reassurance that we can, whilst increasing this, that we get some softening of the impact.
Through you, Chair. Ultimately, this is still an outline application which will be followed by a reserved matters, so I can't give you necessarily that reassurance there, but if members are so inclined, we can bring that reserved matters back to be viewed by you so that you can see that information when it is presented.
Sorry to inflict it on everybody, but it's such a controversial site.
No, I think it's sensible, that. Yeah, I'm okay with that. Mark?
Chair, could I address Councillor Pinnock's earlier point? We've looked at the condition about the last mile and our parcel distribution, which is in the update, and we can further strengthening it by adding in the second line the A to any.
It's a concern that's been raised by several people with me, so and indeed last Saturday. So no, thank you for that.
Thank you, Chair. Just the issue on access onto the site. So we have Cliff Hollins Lane, which, if you follow that north, goes into East Biley, that has a massive rat run problem at the moment, which we're just putting 20-mile-an-hour zones in, more speed bumps, regular accidents, etc. So I'd like some assurance on from the developers that it will be made in such a way that the vans, lorries can't turn onto Cliff Hollins Lane. Yeah. I just want clarification on that, if that's okay, Chair.
Chair, do you want me to just put that? At the junction of Cliff Hollins Lane and I think it's Milcar Hill Road, there is a sign. It's limited to 7.5 tonne except for access.
Hollins Lane.
Yeah,
not the one with Milcar Hill Road.
Yeah, so, well, I suppose they could sign it no right turn.
Had been designed so that it was so sharp that you couldn't very easily turn right.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the detailed design of that junction, but I mean,
yeah, I thought that no right turn was part of the original application. I do remember talking a lot about that at the time, and we didn't want the traffic going up Cliff Hollins Lane, absolutely.
Yeah, there is actually a drawing within the overall application recommending that no entry signs to vehicles over 7.5 tonne be implemented right next to Kringles Bridge. I actually live right next to Kringles Bridge, and I can see the problems that are going to be created, unfortunately.
No, not a planning meeting, so I'm stopping that. Right, we need to make a decision here.
Yeah, sorry, we've got the officer recommendation, but with two minor additions that the reserve matters in relation to this application are brought back to this committee, and we are going to further refine condition 33, which is in the update. Second line, there is an A to be changed to any. So it reads any last mile and or parcel distribution use.
I think, excuse me, I think following those conditions, I'm certainly much more reassured having listened to the discussion. And I'd move officer's recommendation, particularly on the fact that we would have reserve matters coming back, where we'd have the opportunity then to ensure that we had this right in its implementation. So I'd be fine to do that.
I will go to a vote.
Councillor Davies.
For.
Councillor Thompson.
Against.
Councillor Sokol.
For.
Councillor Patterson. For. Councillor Armour.
Against.
Councillor Pinnock.
For.
Councillor Hall.
For.
Okay, so that is carried. Thanks.
Right. Next page.
Chair, can I just point out that this application is actually in Cleckheaton Ward and not Liversedge and Gummersall.
Yes. Come. Thank you. You're welcome. Right. Halifax Road, Hightown, Liversedge, page 207. It should have been Sarah, but I think Callum's doing it. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Colin Harrison, Development Management. Here to present application 2021-93539 for the demolition of existing building and erection of detached dwelling at 628 Halifax Road in Hightown. The site is accessed by an existing vehicular driveway to the south of the site. At present, the site consists of a large building and a temporary container, together with areas of hard standing and grass amenity space. Dwellings bound the site from the southwest through the south and over to the east. On screen, sorry members. That's not the same slide, Chair. On screen now is a picture of the wider urban green space area. It covers approximately 42 hectares. And you can see it covers a wider part. You might recall at the last agenda we also had an application on that same urban green space area. And as we say, this part makes a very small section of that wider area, which is some natural grass area and some semi-natural area also. On screen now, a picture of the existing building on the site, which is to be demolished. The building is used for a garage or storage use. The lawful use of this building has been confirmed through a certificate of lawfulness granted in 2020. The proximity to the existing dwellings to the east can be seen via the image in the bottom left part of the screen. On screen now is a proposed site plan. The proposed development would occupy a similar footprint to that of the existing building, however would have a slightly greater ridge height of 6.6 metres compared to the height of 5 metres for the existing building. Whilst some existing lawned area immediately to the rear of the properties of Halifax Road would be removed as part of the proposals, an area of hard standing to the north of the site would be replaced by a grassed area of a similar size and character, resulting in negligible impact on the character of the site. Whilst appearing to result in backland development, it is acknowledged that the development would be located on a similar axis to that of the Shearings, the new residential development to the east. Furthermore, the presence of an existing building is considered to diminish the visual amenity of the site at present, and for these reasons, the proposal would not be significantly more prominent than the existing arrangement. To preserve the visual amenity, should permission be granted, it is considered reasonable to impose a condition to remove the permitted development rights for the future extensions, additions, and associated outbuildings with the proposed dwelling. On screen now is just some pictures of the site that were taken by the case officer. You can see the adjacent residential development to the north there, and on the right-hand side is the existing access, which would serve this dwelling. On screen now are the proposed elevations. The dwelling will comprise single-storey with accommodation in the roof space. The materials of construction are proposed to be artificial stone walling with artificial slate roof tiles. It is noted that the immediate vicinity has no distinct character and there is no uniform building line also. You can find the use of natural stone, artificial stone, brick and render in close proximity to the application site. Given the variety of the materials in the surrounding site, officers do not consider that the appearance will be out of character with the mixed nature of the area. For the full context of the plan history of the site plan for a previous refusal can be seen on screen now. The current application differs from this previous application in the fact that permission is now sought for one dwelling, which is on a similar footprint to the existing building, whilst the previous highways issues have also been addressed. In conclusion, while the site is allocated as urban green space, the existing use of the site is considered to cause this land to no longer fulfil the intentions of the designation. Whilst the dwelling, by virtue of its siting, form, scale and design, would not diminish the visual amenity of the site and wider area, nor be significantly more prominent than the existing arrangement. For these reasons, and those set out in full within the officer report, officers consider that the proposal as a whole would represent sustainable development that accords with the aims of the local and national policy, and thus are recommending approval. I'll just nip back to another slide. I apologise, this was not the same ones that I got given before. So that is the existing building again. So when we were talking about in terms of height, it is roughly a metre taller, the proposed dwelling, than the existing building will be. But other than that, it is on roughly the same footprint. Thank you, Chair.
Anybody want to move it? Going to second it, Mark? Great stuff. Go to a vote. Put your hand up if you're in favour. Page 217. Perseverance Street, Cowersley, and it's Tom.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, my name is Tom Hunt. I'm an apprentice planning officer in the West Development Management team. To be considered today, this application seeks planning permission for the erection of 7 single-storey detached garages and a small extension of Jubilee Lane here within the identified red line boundary land of Perseverance Street, Kelsley. The garages are accessed by Jubilee Lane by Windsor Road. This application has been brought to the Strategic Committee as it is intended to erect those 7 garages and a small extension to Jubilee Lane in a site allocated for housing, identified as HS 156 land to the east of Main Avenue, Kersley, in the Kirklees local plan. The allocated land is undeveloped and its topography has land rising from northwest to south and southeast, forming a hill. This would be a departure from the local plan under policy LP 65, as proposed it would not be for housing supply itself. To be considered, LP 7, efficient and effective use of land and building is relevant, and the Council can demonstrate 5.17 years of deliverable housing land supply. As set out in the committee report, there has been no representation received for this proposal. This is a site allocated for 76 dwellings with all identified constraints such as public right-of-way, sewer, culvert, watercourse, to name a few. All of those are outside the red line boundary of the application site itself. It is noted that the indicative capacity of the site does not take into account site constraints and other considerations. the topography and site access are material constraints to the development of the land for housing. I mentioned before Main Avenue, which is here, and this is the only point of access currently to the site. Relevant to this application, LP7 of the local plan states that under paragraph D, proposals will allow for access to adjoining undeveloped land so that it may subsequently be developed. Currently, the land is undeveloped and with one point of access. Viewing the site closer, you can see 6 garages and 1 driveway outside the red line boundary to the northeast. Those are to be demolished or removed. This is outside the proposal itself, as it is permitted development. The purpose of this, as stated in the planning statement, is to clear land for a new highway access road to the rest of the house and allocated land to the rear of the garages. This will enable future housing development to have 2 access roads, Main Avenue to the southwest and Windsor Road here. 2 access roads have been recommended by Highways Development in the planning statement and would unlock land for future housing development. There is no outline or full planning application to be considered as yet. Of note, on the 5th of July, the Kirklees Council Cabinet discussed the registered providers cluster programme update and land disposals as an item. In the discussion, they gave approval for 5 sites, which included this site as well, to be developed for high quality, affordable and sustainable homes. It would be delivered by 13 Group, a strategic partner of Homes England and Kirklees Council. Within the red line boundary, which includes Jubilee Lane, the demolished garages and removed driveway would have replacement garages erected in between the 4 garages present here. This would ensure that residents are not adversely affected in their current parking arrangements. The garages are adjacent to residential properties on Perseverance Street and Windsor Road. They are separated by Jubilee Lane. However, those garages are not all owned by the adjacent properties here. The garages were being used by properties on Perseverance Street, Casson Street and Kirklees Lane. To the left are the garages to be removed. To the right are the existing garages within the red line boundary. To the left are the existing garages further up Jubilee Lane when you are facing southwest. To the right is the view of Jubilee Lane facing northeast towards Windsor Road. The plan shows the existing arrangement of garages, showing an opportunity to make better use of the land itself. The proposal would have garages grouped together and integrated with existing garages to form a legible and residential area. This would provide secure garaging for security and reducing the risk of crime. To the left are indicated garage designs which would have internal space specifications appropriate for modern vehicle sizes to be garaged and compliant with the recommendations given in Kirklees Highway Design Guide SPD and Manual for Streets. Externally, they would be 3.2 metres wide and 6.15 metres depth, with a pitched roof of 6.7 and eaves at 2.15 height from ground level approximately. They have a garage and no windows. They would be positioned approximately 17 metres southeast of the properties on Perseverance Street. This would ensure that residential amenity in overshadowing, overlooking and overbearing would not be affected. The individual construction materials and colours would be decided at a future date when the design has been selected by each resident interested in the garages. This would be subject to a pre-commencement condition to have the materials approved by the local planning authority to ensure visual amenity. To the right, the new garages are marked out in blue, interspersed between the existing garages. You would be able to see the section of Jubilee Lane to be extended, which is 7.4 metres in length and 3.05 metres width to the southwest to allow highway access to 2 garages. Considering that the proposal seeks to make efficient and effective use of land under LP7 paragraph D to unlock undeveloped land for future housing development, The increased highways access to the site would constitute a material planning consideration that would outweigh the minor loss of housing allocated land. However, this material consideration under LP7 justifies the departure from the local plan from LP65. As indicated within the committee report, the recommendation is to delegate approval of the application and issuance of the decision notice to the Head of Planning and Development. Thank you very much for listening. And nothing further to add, Chair.
Thanks, Tom. No speakers? Matt?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, there's no problem with the site. What I suppose my concern is we're going to be building these and we haven't been in touch with the residents first to see if they want them. So we're going to build something. I mean, I've got a garage at home. It's never seen a car in it. So, and I think that most people are the same. So are we building what's going to be another white elephant? You know, are we building something that's not necessary? Should we not be asking the residents round there if they're interested and whether they'd commit to paying for the rental of a garage before we build them? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. The garages have been offered by the council to the tenants who have expressed that they want to keep them. Obviously, some are going to be demolished, so we can't take away what, you know, their residential use, and it would help secure the parking arrangements so that there's not undue parking on the streets, which we want to avoid as well. So yes, I mean, it's only as far as it goes, really. They have agreed to taking up the plots.
Any more comments? Somebody willing to move it? Owen, you're moving it? Carol? Right, it's moved and seconded. We'll go to a vote. Show your hands. Go on. Thank you.